Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lorebeards Roleplaying.
Hey, hi.
Oh, hi. Hello, as we say on the other channel.
Hello, hey.
Vera, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Yeah, hi, I'm Vera Sevilla. I am an online thing maker. I'm one of the writers for Warhammer Fantasies RPGs. I make stuff and do things. I'm a game dev, I'm a RPG designer, and I'm a podcaster here in the Lorebeards. Whoa!
It's true. Hi, everybody. My name is Ross Watson. I'm a game designer and author. I've worked on over 100 different role-playing game products, some of the highlights being most of the Warhammer 40k roleplay line, Torg Eternity, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and Savage Worlds Rifts, just to name a few. And today we're going to talk about one of the oldest, not quite the oldest, but one of the oldest D&D settings, and possibly the most prolific or most successful of those settings. That is the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, I would say it is at least the best known, right? Like at this point, surely.
I would think so. One of the things when I was doing my research, I just checked. There are 40 different board games based on Forgotten Realms. And there are around 50, depending on how you count them, video games based on the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, with more upcoming, I think.
Right, and we're not even going to talk about the novels or the number. and Forgotten Realms has been in every edition of D&D since Advanced. Since Advanced D&D.
It sort of edged out Greyhawk, right? It just became like the thing.
Okay, I have something really interesting to talk about with how Forgotten Realms replaced Greyhawk. If you want to get into that, I'm so excited to talk about that part.
Well, let's start with like the campaign setting concepts, right? We talked about the history of D&D. We talked about like what was first up in the settings. We've read the OG books. We've seen that there's a very vague setting, like as if you go far enough back. But at some point, Wizards and D&D wanted to include proper setting books in their game, like give people an environment to run around in, give people a space to play, and this has been a staple of RPGs ever since, right? Having a well-developed environments, characters, factions.
That's right. And the Forgotten Realms, it's the lore here is massive. I mean, we could do a whole channel on just Forgotten Realms lore. I mean, I think Andy and Ryan would probably like have a heart attack if we suggested that, but there's a ton of Forgotten Realms lore.
Welcome to part 1 of 10 on the Underdark specifically.
Oh my god, I love their Underdark and Forgotten Realms too. I do. All right, so just very high-level overview. The Forgotten Realms is mostly, when you're talking about the Forgotten Realms, you're mostly talking about the continent of Faerun on the world of Toril. And this is a... Oh, go ahead.
Usually the Sword Coast, because it's narrowed in so much over the years.
We're going to talk about that too. I do want to mention, I want to get into discussing this.
Yes.
It's a very high magic setting. It's got a very long history, not only in the real world, but in its own setting. It has a very, very long history. Many ancient civilizations have risen and fallen many times. There's dungeons and ruins and artifacts everywhere. Most of the time when you're talking about the Forgotten Realms, you're talking about what's called the Age of Humanity, or the Era of Upheaval, which is around the 1300s to 1400s DR, which stands for Dale Reckoning, which is the year calendar of the Forgotten Realms. And that means this is a period of time where Faerun is primarily dominated by humans in most regions, but they do still share the world with elves and dwarves and orcs and other stranger peoples as well. Is that a pretty good high-level overview, I think?
I would say so. The highest level overview is that it was I think the second major campaign setting, right? That was like really pushed for TSR for the game.
It depends on how you grade Blackmoor. Because Blackmoor is the first, like, quote unquote setting. That was Dave Arneson's homebrew campaign that eventually was turned into a setting. Then there's Greyhawk, and then there's Forgotten Realms, which comes along. I think like I want to say they purchased it in like '86, so possibly Dragonlance was around at that time.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong to view it this way, but I think that Blackmoor did not have the same staying power, I would say.
Oh, very few people even know about Blackmoor. It is a very obscure, it is much lesser known of all the settings. So
maybe I'm wrong to think of it as not major. I'm being a zoomer at this. Like, oh, I don't know about it too well, so it must not be important. Greyhawk was monolithic though for a good while, and then
for good
very
reason.
much the Forgotten Realms were. They are unforgettable. So
Vera, if I may,
yeah,
why was Greyhawk so big and around for so long?
it was the setting. It was like it was Gygax's game. It was like the game. It was the whole evolving realm that was made by the man, the D&D man himself. It was what set the imaginary for D&D, right? For most people.
Yeah,
because Gygax become like synonymous with the game, and that was his world, and like it was the game. It was like the setting.
150%. So you've just named why Greyhawks was so important. You've named why it was around for so long, and partially why the Forgotten Realms replaced it. So the Greyhawk was developed at Gygax's campaigns in the 1970s, and it was the very first setting that was widely seen by D&D players through supplements. There was a 1980 book called World of Greyhawk, for example, and the 1983 box set for D&D, which is the one that got me in, which is has this cover, by the way. That one is also set in Greyhawk. Then Blackmoor we just briefly glossed over, but then we get to Dragonlance was 84, so Dragonlance was around before Forgotten Realms. But Forgotten Realms comes along in 86, and it's really fascinating as to why this was a thing. So let's see here. It was Ed Greenwood's home campaign, the Forgotten Realms. Ed Greenwood is the creator of the Forgotten Realms, and he was running games. He was creating material for the realms by the 60s. So before D&D even existed, the Forgotten Realms existed, and Greenwood was working on it and developing it. These were the story. This was the place where Ed put all of his stories as a child, and then he adopted it into his campaign world when he started running D&D. And it was presented as a parallel world to our own, so that people from Earth could go visit Forgotten Realms people could go visit Earth.
This was peddled off of eventually for various reasons.
Well, so a lot of the ways that guys like men of a certain age, like myself, who were growing up in the 80s and wanting to know more about Dungeons and Dragons, one of the places we turned was Dragon Magazine, which was a monthly publication by TSR that lasted for several years. And in Dragon Magazine, Ed Greenwood started writing all these articles, and he wrote things like Pages from the Mages, and he wrote Elminster's Ecologies, and he wrote like all these different article bundles, if you will, of different things, and they would all be from the perspective of either Elminster, which is Ed Greenwood's self-insert character into the Forgotten Realms, a powerful and ancient wizard, or through the eyes of other people from the Forgotten Realms. So the Forgotten Realms started to get into D&D not through the traditional path, but by being published in Dragon Magazine, everybody going, wow, this is really cool. We want more of this. I don't know. Have you read any of the old Dragon magazines?
I've read like PDFs.
No, that's fair. I mean, I would not expect you to have read any of them.
A smattering though. I've done like a couple like White Dwarf dives and Dragon Magazine things, just like filtering through what's available. But
yeah, they're fun. I mean, they are definitely a product of their time, but they are certainly fun for me. But I don't know if anybody who's younger than say 25 right now at the time of this broadcast is probably going to be like, I don't think I need to read e-magazines. I get that. Trust me. I understand. But yeah, the articles in the realms were about the gods and the magic items and the places like Waterdeep and the Dale Lands. These were glimpses into this world that Ed had developed, and it started to build this fan base. And it showed TSR that he had this very fleshed out, very reusable, if you will, world. That it was not just a rough sketch. This was a place with people and names and histories, and it felt alive in a lot of ways that Greyhawk did not.
Well, like Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms both sort of spun out of table play, right? They were campaign settings run at the table, but Greyhawk was begun in a dungeon, the dungeons of Castle Greyhawk, where Gygax would torment his players, and it spun out from this very old school conception of what these dungeons were and what was surrounding them, what informed them, and like what you could use to sell your items and loot. Whereas the Forgotten Realms were founded on a different style of play, I would say.
Well, by the mid '80s, though, TSR had a Gary Gygax problem. Lorraine Williams, who was the current CEO, the brand new CEO, had ousted Gary in an event called the Night of Long Knives, which we will probably discuss at some point, where Gary was essentially removed from TSR by a coalition of investors like the Bloom brothers, Lorraine Williams, a few other people. And he was basically cast out. He was like, be gone. so Gygax took his toys and went off to do other things like Legendary Journeys and there was a few other games. I can't remember the top of my head. Cyborg Commando, which we did cover briefly. But the that left TSR going, okay, well, we don't want to keep using Greyhawk. Why don't we want to keep using Greyhawk? Because it's connected to Gary. Gary is persona non grata at the moment. There's a lot of reasons why Lorraine and the Blooms got rid of Gary. I don't want to get into it. It's a very long history. Let's just say I think Gary was well, it's a long story. I don't want to get into it. There's so many different things to talk about with that. The important thing you need to know is the TSR needed a setting. And so they went to Ed Greenwood and they said, hey, how would you like to sell us the Forgotten Realms, which we will then use as our new core setting for D&D? And Greenwood was like, okay, as long as I still get to work on it. And TSR said, sure. Would you like to take a wild guess as to how much he got paid for the Forgotten Realms?
Fabulous riches. No. They bought it. According to interviews with Greenwood and some of the other people at TSR, they purchased the rights to the Forgotten Realms for the princely sum of $5,000. Yeah, I mean, even in sounds like a lot to somebody who's doing like a lot of contract work. That sounds like a lot, kind of, but also
even in 1980s money, that's not a lot. That's like $10,000 today.
Yeah.
I probably he got screwed on that. I mean, if you want to look at this, is an ongoing debate is whether or not he got screwed by TSR on the deal, because nobody else wanted to purchase it at the time, and TSR purchasing it elevated it from the magazine to something that was far more impactful and has carried forward.
Imagine if he had been cut into a 0.1% residual.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just even so. Let this be a lesson to you creators out there. If anybody ever if there are some people who are like, I just want to farm my field of ideas and create something so big that the Disney mouse swoops in and buys it from me for a huge sum and then I retire. Okay, that's fine. Absolutely. But if you're a creator like myself who wants to keep some control or investment in the things that they make, don't just sell it for a lump sum. get a
tiny residual. If things do well, you'll be very happy about it. Like, I think there were actors in the OG Star Wars who got cut in for like some really small percentile, and like they made pretty well out from that as of their estates. Like, it's a big deal. Like, even today, like they're still making things in the Forgotten Realms. Like, there was a recent 5e splat about Waterdeep. Baldur's Gate 3, huge deal.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even a half of a percentage point would have seen him very, very rich man.
Yeah.
So the first product was the Forgotten Realms campaign set, which I happen to have a copy of right here. Bam! That's the original from 1987. And this is what they call the gray box set. There is another gray box set that's for second edition D&D, but when they talk about the gray box, this is the one. I mean, it's got an upside down thing on the back here, but there you
go. There he is. There's Ed Greenwood.
And I want to be very, very clear. This here is my personal favorite version of the Forgotten Realms. In this version of the Forgotten Realms, very little is defined outside of some things on the Sword Coast and the Dale Lands. And there's a lot of gray space. They call it the gray box for its color, but it also has a lot of like just very basic descriptions of places and things, and it tends to ignite your imagination in ways that 10 splat books on Icewind Dale do not do. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If you love the Forgotten Realms, or if you're curious about the Forgotten Realms, this is a really interesting product. I think you could buy the PDF on DriveThruRPG. So.
Yeah, and this is sort of an ongoing push and pull in tabletop design, right? Which is how much gray do you leave in the setting? I'm very gray myself. I'm biased toward this, but I think it's healthy to have like vagary and have space that you sort of fill in with your imaginary, because naturally over time a setting will get more fleshed out, right? People will visit new corners and there'll be splat books published on things, and they'll get like more distinct classes and information and side quests like lend context to specific zones that were implied previously. Like this happens in Warhammer all the time. We'll chance upon like some referenced city and township, and it'll get developed into something new. Like that's healthy in some ways, but also it means that you're now like specifically informed as to what this is, what happens there. It's defined for you in a way that it wasn't before.
That's right. Cormyr was also in that book. Cormyr was. So if you want to talk about like what is the core of the Forgotten Realms, it is the Sword Coast, it is Cormyr, it is Waterdeep, it is the Dale Lands, and it is Elminster. All of those things are in that box. Now, Ed did continue to develop a lot of this stuff and add more core elements as we go on, but like in the first box set, those are the core things that you will see forever going on.
Is he still developing it, right? Like, is he still like working the project?
As far as I know, he is essentially retired from working on it, but he does have a podcast on YouTube where he discusses like secrets of the realms. Have you ever met him?
I have not. I would love to, though.
I've met Ed. He's a very nice guy. He's a very approachable, very nice. Very like I grew up reading books like Spellfire, which he worked on, which was a novel. And of course, the Drizzt Do'Urden novels and things that later fleshed out the Icewind Dale area in the Forgotten Realms. I tell you, if you read Ed's novels, it's a very interesting perspective on the Forgotten Realms. Specifically, if you read the Knights of Mithrandir series, that's the novels where the editors just kind of gave up and were like, okay, you know what, Ed, just write whatever you want. And Ed Greenwood, very talented designer, super nice guy, very dirty old man. Holy moly. If you read those Knights of Mithrandir books, everybody's fucking everybody else. I mean,
well, he said that his players were interested in a more down-to-earth sort of campaign where they had personal lives. Oh boy, what could that mean?
I have to imagine his home game was very horny. That's all I could say, because just everybody's banging everybody else.
Good, bless their hearts.
You know what? There's no kink shaming here. It's just there it is. It's a thing where like the queen is walking out naked in the middle of a conference in one of the novels, and I'm just like, oh, really? All right then. Okay. It's surprising because you read about it in the material, and you're like, oh, this is Lady Illustrial of Silvery Moon, and she's like, oh wow, she's really elegant, very very classy. And then you read about her in the Knights of Mithrandir, you're like, oh, okay, and she is DTF. That's great.
That can be classy.
I mean, it can be, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it is worth mentioning.
Yeah, what made it to print, I think, was a slightly sanitized version. For the sake of aiming the product at like 12-year-olds, right?
Well, it is. Young adults were definitely one of the core audience for sure. So in the mid '80s, Ed is kind of the father of the Forgotten Realms. He's still working on it, but the primary role in TSR is given to Jeff Grubb. Now, Jeff Grubb is a highly decorated game designer with a whole bunch of great stuff under his belt. He's one of the designers of the Marvel Superheroes game, which would later be called Face Rip, one of the best superhero games ever made. He also is the lead writer, or was the lead writer up until very recently. I'm not sure if he's still doing it, of Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. So if you enjoy Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, that's Jeff Grubb. That's also one of the main guys who helped develop the Forgotten Realms. And then you get to the late 80s, early 90s, which is the second edition of Dungeons & Dragons. This is when TSR was like, okay, the Forgotten Realms isn't just a setting, it's the setting. And they supported the absolute shit out of it. There were regional box sets about Waterdeep and the North. There was box sets on the Dalelands. There were the Volos guides, tons of lore articles, adventure modules, just tons and tons. They shoveled material into the Forgotten Realms. Crucially, the realms also became the backbone of Dungeons & Dragons fiction. This is where all the novels were set, especially the Drizzt Do'Urden novels by R.A. Salvatore, which were huge in that era. The post-Dragonlance, that was the biggest spike in people reading books about or novels about D&D. And then this is also when they started something that is controversial. Like, some people love it, some people hate it. That the idea that there were these big meta plot events that would happen across the Forgotten Realms. The first of which was called the Time of Troubles, which reshaped the pantheon of gods and advanced the timeline a little bit. But the dense and ongoing support that it received in the 80s and 90s really pushed Forgotten Realms to the forefront of D&D, and everybody was interested in it. Everybody was playing games set there, or reading novels set there, or playing video games or board games that were also set there.
Yeah, like, you can see the trends this set, right? Because this kind of meta plot between editions thing we see in Warhammer now. Like, it's the Circuitrix Maledictum, for example. Like, there's all sorts of examples of this, like in modern setting design, where you have these big pushes for it's like a marketing event. It justifies changes in the system and setting. It keeps things fresh, and it's like a narrative import that people can buy into. Like, it's set a trend, I would say. Big influential deal.
Right, and this goes all the way up to the Dungeons & Dragons movie that we got this just a few years back.
Which is great. I really like that.
Which I really liked, Honor Among Thieves. It is not the setting of the early 2000s one, the Dungeons & Dragons movie. Whatever. We should probably discuss that at some point. The Dungeons & Dragons movie from the early 2000s, the one with Jeremy Irons.
Ooh, we get popcorn.
Blood will rain from the sky.
Well, it could be fun. We could screen that in the Discord.
Oh my god, that would be awesome.
Let's talk about that after this. I think it'd be fun to do movie nights.
that'd be a special one. Actually, the sequel to that though, Wrath of the Dragon God, is pretty good. Very few people saw it. It went straight to streaming, or video, but it's very good.
I have not seen that. Wait a minute.
Yeah, Wrath of the Dragon God is actually a pretty good movie. I wouldn't say it's a great movie. Definitely not to say it's great. Pretty good is where that's where I'm going to land.
The Forgotten Realms also became the home of D&D's video games.
Right. Most of them. The vast majority of them, actually.
Yeah. Like, I think a Pool of Radiance was, right?
All of the Pool of Radiance, all of the Eye of the Beholder, all of the... just tons of them, man. All the Baldur's Gates, all the Icewind Dales are set there.
Neverwinter Nights, the whole thing.
All the Neverwinter Nights are set there. Which and some of those games are freaking awesome. I've played nearly all of them. So yeah, this was their big deal. It became the default backdrop for third edition. Although third edition launched with Greyhawk in the core book, but they that was like a like, hey, we're still, even though it's a new company, because this is Wizards of the Coast now.
Yeah.
Even though it's a new company that has just bought TSR, we still honor Dungeons and Dragons, and so they made Greyhawk the setting in the core books. But they did support third edition did support Forgotten Realms pretty solidly. They had a massive Forgotten Realms campaign setting book that was released 25 years ago. What even is time? In 2001. This book is famous for being extremely comprehensive. It has detailed geography. There's a massive map you can pull out of the back of that book, and it's huge. The deities, the magic systems, the organizations, the timelines, regional character options, and most of the high-level NPCs were all detailed in that core book. Hey, we've got a super chat. You want to read this one?
Yeah, Gary Johnson, thank you so much for the chat. Last time we talked about the hero system and the flaws that never seem to count. Are you familiar with the fate system, the aspects in it address it?
Okay. Familiar with fate is, I think, somewhat accurate. Like I do know, I know kind of some things about it, and like how the dice rolls work, things like that. The aspects. Would you like to comment on this first, and then I'll come in after?
I have read Fate in the past. I have not played Fate. I'm interested. So I am mathematically interested in Fate. I think that its like design is cool. I'm the kind of like tabletop nerd who took like pure math classes in college to better understand how dice work, and I see Fate and I get excited about it. So that is my in there.
So now anybody who's a actual Fate guy can, please chime in if I get this wrong. But my understanding is that aspects are like little short phrases that you describe something, you use to describe something that's really true and important about your character, or the situation or the game world. And it's the main way that you hook the fiction into the dice is through the aspect that you're calling on or referencing, or as context for the role, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's very vibe based.
Right, and it could be something like, old soldier with new scars is an aspect. And you can invoke them, you can compel them. The game master can use it to make your aspect cause trouble in a way that fits the story. You can use it to get a bonus to a roll, or sometimes a small narrative control, small amount of narrative control. And I've always thought it was a very interesting mechanic, but I felt that it relied heavily on a group that wouldn't abuse it.
Yeah, it's sort of fudgy, which is the idea. Well, if you're like, yeah,
because it's based on fudge. Because Fate is based on fudge. That's why it's funny.
Like you have a character like James Bond, who's a smooth talker and silent pistol. Like, right, that's a I would say a strong play. There's a lot you can apply that to.
The reason why I want to bring up abuse is because there are people I have gamed with who like to break systems. Okay, and if I try to imagine what my friend Michel would do if he was going to play this game, is a friend of mine from Germany that I worked with at Ulysses Spiel. Michel would probably look at this game and say, okay, so my aspect is I'm Batman. I will invoke this every single roll because I'm Batman, and Batman applies to everything.
He's playing Ken from the Barbie movie, great at doing stuff.
I mean, that's a legit aspect. So, like I said, it's a little open to abuse, but I think it's a very creative mechanic.
Yeah, like the ideal aspect, I guess, is specific and evocative.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly intended to be something that you use to enhance the story, rather than something you abuse. I mean, which the vast majority of rules are meant that way. So there's that. Necroplayer has a good one. I would like to read this one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Necro.
D&D is my first system. Necromancer is my favorite class. Game 5e is not built at all for the fantasy of that class. I also love kobolds, my beloved. So now he's explained his avatar, which is a kobold, and his name, which is Necroplayer. He likes to play necromancers and he likes kobolds. Look,
I
at nothing
understand.
wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. And I think I feel like you probably could play an ethical necromancer in 5e. I think that's certainly a possibility. You know, it's the scene where you have my axe, you have my bow, and the necromancer says, "And you have your dead brother," because he raises him up as a skeleton.
Well, like necromancy is such a difficult archetype, though. Like it's so beyond the considerations, like the narrative import of like, oh my god, there's a skeleton now, which is very scary for a lot of players. There is a mechanical challenge to creating like legions of the undead in terms of action economy, which we've talked about before. A lot of times is an element of design that remains challenging and important both for DMs and for core system designers, because the necromancer class fantasy is go my 36 skeletons attack, and that is really hard to run. It is really hard to balance around. It is really unpredictable because your necromancer dips down at the local cemetery. You've got a sudden army in a really pissed off village.
This is why I love hosting the show with Vera. Vera is a very intelligent and very thoughtful person about these kinds of things. So I'm really glad she's here to present, like, because she's absolutely on the money. That is the power fantasy of the necromancer, and that is one of the reasons why it is awkward to design for, because it is essentially a summoner or a pet user, depending on what terminology you want to use.
But with this specific fantasy, usually of Legion, like most of the summoner archetypes have a guy. You get like a character, and a lot of your feats are in this character. Your animal companion, that's like a dude. Your summoned elemental, that's a dude. The necromantic Legion is very convenient sometimes.
Well, I think there are good examples of just having a dude, like Kemler and Krell are a good example for Warhammer Fantasy. But yeah, anyway. Getting off topic.
Like you could have there's a great example Von Hall and his like dragon, his headless skeleton dragon, also in Warhammer. Like there are tons of like single mob vibes, but you do need the Legion to show up sometimes for the broader fantasy of it, and they're either like too good or they're too useless, and it's hard to find the right spot for that.
Extremely. And you're right, that is the classic, is the, here's my army of skeletons. That's what I have. That's what I bring to the table. All right, so that's I think we've talked about 3rd edition for Forgotten Realms. 4th edition, which starts in the late 2000s, early 2010s. This is when designers wanted to modernize and streamline the Forgotten Realms, which they created a event called the Spell Plague, and did a time jump of around 100 years in the timeline. This was a very awkward moment in gaming history because they chose to call this event the Sundering, and at the exact time that this was happening, there was a massive split in the D&D community where people that were not especially enamored of 4th edition's approach chose to play Pathfinder. And in fact, Pathfinder had become the most played role-playing game in the world because it was largely 3.5 with some extra bits. We like to call it 3.75 was the original Pathfinder.
Yeah, and like part of what defined this was that Golarion is similarly fleshed out to Faerun. Like it was an easy translation for a lot of people. Like, wow, there's a lot of shit here. I can play this.
It just struck me as like a very, like, a lot of things with 4th edition's marketing were not exactly great choices, and calling their big event the Sundering when literally there was a massive fracture in the fan base, not a good look. What can I say?
I can also note, Matthew points out that Drawsteel did manage to make a summon across 12+ minions. That is because Drawsteel is really excellent and really, really smart. Drawsteel is a particularly intelligently designed game. I think this is very hard to do.
I need to get a copy of it. I would like to do this.
Superb.
Wow, that's high praise. I will definitely have to get a copy of it. Oh, we got a super chat here from Pumpkin Historian. You want to read this one?
Yeah, Pumpkin Historian. Thank you so much. Do you think that species such as elves, dwarfs, orcs, etc. are holding the fantasy genre back? These species traits are so entrenched that it makes world building more difficult and less imaginative. Ooh. So this is the part where we start to talk about Michael Moorcock. we've gotten to that part.
Everybody drink. Michael Moorcock.
Cheers. So this is a question primarily to me of setting tropes, because it's true. If you have dwarfs in your setting, you expect them to be a few things. You expect them to be hard drinking, hairy, and short. You think they're going to be stoic. They're going to be strong. And if they're none of those things, it's very strange you are calling them dwarfs. Right? There is a fantasy language that we have now based on trope and convention that serves to create familiar, almost like Jungian archetypes for fantasy races that show up.
Jungian archetypes. My God, you are incredibly smart. I just love it.
I don't know about all that, but this is an archetypal thing. It's true because you see these in all sorts of settings, and you see variants in this. It spins on this. There's twists like hashtag our elves are different. There's like a whole TV tropes page about this. I think that I would say that it is a convention of genre to have archetypes, to have tropes, and that in some ways a genre is defined by their existence, right? By certain patterns. A genre is nothing but the patterns that comprise it, I would say. And in fantasy, we have different mentalities and different ways of being that sort of contribute to this. I think like really well executed fantasy like Dungeon Meshi puts twists on these that remain familiar but intrigue. The tall men there are the humans who are like part of the broader human realm of existence that includes elves and half-foots and so on. And it's done smartly and in a way that makes humans feel like they aren't the default. There's a lot of cleverness you can bring into this, but the more you work in an established genre, the more I would say it's important to find ways to twist that, to play on it, to do something that is honest to your genre but fresh. It's harder and harder the more you're building on.
Vera went exactly where I was going to go.
Sorry to ramble.
No, this is great. This is awesome. No, I love it. So you're describing Pumpkin Historian, which, by the way, welcome. I don't believe I've seen a super chat from you before, so this is really cool to get one from you. I was thinking, it seems like you're looking at like the basis of Tolkien, which is the foundation for Western fantasy. And Tolkien was the guy who was like, these are elves are like this, dwarfs are like this, orcs are like this. And we have just been building on that since the 30s. That's a long time. I mean, it was nearly 100 years of building on that foundation to create Western fantasy. And are they holding fantasy as a whole back? I would have to say no, I don't think that they're holding it back. I do sympathize with the idea that they feel stale and unoriginal. Like, I can certainly understand why someone would think that. I've been around on this earth. I'm a man of a certain age. I'm 51 years old. So I've been involved in fantasy since I was old enough to read, which is like 5 or 6 years old. So for the last 44 years, let's just say, I've been immersed in Western fantasy. And I think Vera, mentioned it a very good point, which is that it's all about finding new ways to approach tropes that we've become very, very familiar with. That's just a part of storytelling. But, and this is what I think is really important, if you feel that elves, dwarves, and orcs are holding the fantasy genre back, you're not alone. People have been thinking that for a very long time. I remember in the Dragon Magazine era days, when I was like 8 or 9 years old and reading those, there was a company that made a game called Talos Lanta. It was a setting called Talos Lanta, or setting and game called Talos Lanta. And their selling point, the thing that they put in the ad in the magazine was, "We have no elves." Like, it was just like, and she says there's a TV tropes page about our elves are different. That was also a huge thing back in the day. You know, we have snow elves, which are a different type of elf, and star elves and stuff like. I mean, they would just find different approaches on these things. But, and this is also something Vera brought up that I think is very, very smart. Western fantasy has been adopted by anime in some ways that would probably surprise you. There are a lot of really good fantasy anime series out there that do things differently with these species. Goblin Slayer, good example for the goblins. For elves, of course, there's Freyrin, which is just beautiful, just absolutely stunningly beautiful anime. I highly recommend that one. Record of Lotus War, many others have taken and done different things with them. Dungeon Meshi is another great example of how how you can look at ecology in a very different way in a Western fantasy approach. So great question. But I don't know. I feel like fantasy is just taking off more and more and more and more. It's just, it's on an upward trend. So.
Yeah, that's sort of also how I envision this, rather than being like an entrenched pit of tangled already dones that you have to like push through to create. It's like this towering structure of the canon of all of fantasy that you have to build something new atop to stand out, or at least jut out from. And that's unstable naturally because there's a lot of ground that's been tread, and it's all been pushing the broader tropes of this genre and defining them and refining them and stretching what they are. Because anytime something novel is done, it becomes part of what has already become expected. So I do think, becomes more challenging over time to find like really innovative approaches, but it also becomes progressively more rewarding.
Okay, so again, I'm a man of a certain age, so I'm going to name some things that are all very old, but they're all like super different ways to look at some of these things. For me, when I was a kid, one of the things that I first started reading was ElfQuest. It was a comic book series by Wendy Pini, and eventually became a role-playing game, which I actually have a copy of back there, produced by Chaosium. So it does have a connection to the show. It's not just a comic book. And ElfQuest is a radically different way to look at elves and trolls, which are essentially orcs or dwarves. It's like a weird combination of dwarves and orcs. But go check that out if you want to see a very, very different take on Western fantasy. And then there's the High Elves of Warhammer, which fascinated me. I love the way that they decided to approach it. Well, not just the High Elves. I mean, there's the Wood Elves and the Dark Elves as well. And they all have different and unique and interesting approaches to what is an elf, quote unquote. Hell, Warhammer dwarves are one of my favorite expressions of dwarfs in any fiction. For really good orcs, though, I mean, there's lots of different places to find them. Anyway, so we're getting. I could go on forever about this, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Like, this could almost be its own episode. Like, this
absolutely, 100%.
Maybe we should consider this being its own episode.
You want me to add to the list? I will add it to the list.
I think so. I think this is a really cool topic. I think we could go like buy fantasy species and talk them through. That could be fun. And that could be useful for world building too. Like this is an intriguing topic, I would say.
Okay. Well, I will. I'll add it to the list here. If you want to talk about something while I type this up, that'd be great. And
I'll just
click off of that there.
Yeah. I'll just note that there are a lot of like other cool examples of like unique twists that are defined by their sort of rich culture and distinction from what has been before. Like a World of Warcraft's trolls, the way that was executed, very cool. I think it's like the first time I can think of that like the troll archetype was sort of a dignified thing instead of like a big meaty monster. Very cool stuff. Very cool stuff.
Shadowrun also has like orcs and trolls of Shadowrun are some of my favorite expressions of that as well.
Oh yeah.
I actually don't really. Yeah, suffice to say, that's a much longer discussion about the Shadowrun and how the Shadowrun handles all these different species.
Well, Shadowrun's smart. Shadowrun like is a great example of like taking this stuff and elevating and building something new, right?
And it was connected across it. I'm sorry, I could do a whole episode on just Shadowrun and how Shadowrun was connected to Earth Dawn, which was a whole different game. and there was a lot of lore shared between them, which I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. I'm intrigued by this.
It gets wild. Actually, I'm just going to add Shadowrun to the list because God, I
the list is growing. Excellent. Welcome to season 2, y'all.
Got a super chat from Necro Player. He says, my big thing on D&D races is I wish there were more weirdos and monster ones like gnolls and the like. Do you mind if I jump in here? So here's something that's fascinating to me. Okay, Necro Player. As a man of a certain age, when I was growing up playing D&D, all the way through probably up until the 2000s. Probably into like late 3rd edition. Elves, dwarves, orcs, gnomes, halflings. That was what you saw in a party. Okay, that was a D&D party. Okay, but ever since Planescape came around, people have been like, oh, hey, and I've dipped into that pool too. There's so many really cool species from the Planescape side: tieflings, Aasimar, Kansen. If you're not Kansen and Axanar, I think there's the Law and Chaos ones, which are the Heaven and Hell ones. Which, you know, Aasimar heavenly, tieflings are hellish.
Yeah, and then you've got like your other
alignment. Yeah. So that was the Kansen and I think Axanar. I don't remember.
Something Axan-esque sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so those species added a whole new thing, and then you get to the last 20 years. Let's say last 15. Okay. Critical Role comes along, and Critical Role is like, okay, yes, we have gnomes and halflings, but we also have Goliaths, and we have tieflings, and we have Dragonborn. And the last couple of campaigns for Critical Role have been like just absolutely the weirdo menagerie. If you want to see like, hey, there's all kinds of tieflings, there's all kinds of Aasimar, there's all kinds of different species that you I think Sam Riegel played a robot for a while, right? Like he was fresh cut grass. FCG is like a type of mechanical being, like a Warforged. Warforged were released around 25 years ago. What is time? I don't understand. Anyway, where did all the years go? Anyway, the point being is that something I've discussed with my friends is that nowadays you go into your typical gaming table and you ask what everybody's playing, and it's very rarely elf, dwarf, gnome, halfling. And now it's a lot more Dragonborn, tiefling, Aasimar, you know, Owlin, right, is one of the new ones from D&D. I say new. Owlin have been around for like 5 or 6 years at this point. So yeah, I feel like the variety is growing, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's actually great because Tolkien defined fantasy for so long, and just it was heavy. There was a guiding hand of Tolkien on top of almost all Western fantasy, that it was elf, dwarf, orc, you know, halfling. There was not a lot of variety. Now there's more variety, and I actually really like it. I'm okay adventuring with a party of freaks and weirdos because it's new and fresh. Sorry, go ahead, please. Vera, would you like to comment on this?
Oh yeah, it's an interesting topic to me because it represents a distinct shift in sort of the imaginary of what playing D&D is about, and has changed a lot about like the aesthetic of the game, I would say. Like at one point, the idea was that like monstrous party members were kind of the exception, right? And narratively, it was implied that there would be an uphill battle to like earn trust and to become welcome in like certain cities and so on. Like that was the established vibe, and that has become less the case in modern editions. It has become less expected for there to be like archetypally monstrous races for lots of reasons, many of which are quite good. But it does change the mode. Like there is a certain appeal to being able to like turn your brain off and like, okay, these are like the evil monsters, and then here are our heroic party. We're gonna go out and do violence. That is a style of play. It invites all sort of like ethical questions when you go like, okay, actually, there are no like default evil species, which is what we've moved towards strongly right? And that's intriguing. It complicates like some of the game's history. It complicates a lot of the settings. And
actually, this is a problem that Forgotten Realms struggled with, and something I'm going to talk about.
Also, Morgan, thank you so much for the cheer. We support Smurf Nevlin here. Give him the good Underdark raise. Hell yeah. Big Underdark fan.
Mornington Crest, I appreciate the super chat. Smurf Neblin are really cool. I have never played one, but I've always wanted to. They're very, very cool.
They're so cool.
All right. I like this comment.
Hey, wait, hey.
Vera could be a Smurf Neblin. She's gray and short. I don't know how short she is, actually. It's difficult to tell scale in her purple.
I keep posing you. I'm 6'7". Yeah. What now?
You're asserting dominance. All right. So the main thing I want to talk about with the 4th edition change to Forgotten Realms is that it tied the rules and the setting into the corporate direction far more strongly than it had been before. This is now Hasbro, not Wizards. Wizards of the Coast technically, but now it's Hasbro running the show. And under Hasbro, Forgotten Realms has been a place where if there's a big edition shift, there's usually a big lore shift or a lore overhaul. And 4th edition was the first time we got to see that. They changed a whole bunch of things about the settings of D&D. Like Ravenloft was essentially removed or turned into a small part of the Plane of Shadow. And there's a lot of things that happen. I don't want to get into it. But let's just say there was a lore overhaul in 4th edition. Then we got 5th edition, 2014. And this is when D&D kind of pivoted away from box sets for settings and big lore books for settings. And instead they do adventure paths, stuff like Lost Mine of Fandelver, Tyranny of Dragons, Out of the Abyss, Curse of Strahd, Storm King's Thunder, various other things. And arguably, Curse of Strahd is not set in the Forgotten Realms, but it's adjacent. So that's the reason I brought it up. But most of these are like Icewind Dale, Waterdeep, Dragon Heist, and Dungeon of the Mad Mage. They were all Forgotten Realms with like the arguable exception of Curse of Strahd. And I'm sorry. I'm saying they're all Forgotten Realms. They're mostly Forgotten Realms. There were obviously some books that were other settings as well. But the Chris Perkins, one of the big developers of 5th edition, he said that the Forgotten Realms was a giant playground layered with prior civilizations, with Forgotten Realms under the realms you know as the core theme. Like nearly every spot in the Forgotten Realms has older ruins beneath it, which is one of the core themes from the original Grey Box. So I do credit them for that. One of the criticisms, though, about 5th edition's approach to the Forgotten Realms is it's very nostalgia-based. They brought back a lot of characters from 2nd and 3rd edition. They brought back a lot of touchstone storylines and places. And it feels, 5th edition Forgotten Realms feels very nostalgia goggles in some ways. Now, there are executions of the Forgotten Realms that are way better than others. I would point to Baldur's Gate 3 as one of the best executions of the Forgotten Realms in media, period. It's just excellent. Hey, we've got another one from Gary Garrison. Would you like to read this one?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. You mentioned the Song of Ice and Fire RPG, the Schwab version. How about an interview with Schwab? D&D, Wolfrip, Cipher, Soddle, also FRN.
So Rob Schwab, great guy. Would love to interview him. If you know him, reach out. Tell him we'd love to talk to him. He's a great designer too. Dungeons & Dragons, yes, he worked on it. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplaying, yep, worked on that too. Song of Ice and Fire Roleplayer, as I like to call it, Sifrip. Yeah, he worked on that. Shadow of the Demon Lord is what that other one is.
Yeah, Shadow of the Demon Lord, yeah.
Which is Rob Schwab's big indie game that he worked on. Also, FR Win. Forgotten Realms Win? FR?
Forgotten Realms Now.
Forgotten Realms Now, yeah. If that FR stands for something else, I'm sorry, Gary. I don't know what that means. But
I will note, Shadow of the Demon Lord has, I think, my favorite cover art in RPGs. It's so cool. Oh man, there are some really good ones.
So I've spoken to Rob Schwab about Shadow of the Demon Lord, and he told me, he says, listen, I grew up just like you did, he says to me. He says, I grew up with all of the parental figures and religious figures in my life telling me that D&D was full of Satan and, you know, black magic spells and shit. He says, I never saw that when I played D&D, so I wanted to make a game that did have all that shit in it, legitimately. And that's what Shadow of the Demon Lord is like his, you know, heavy metal album cover homage to the D&D that people remember in some ways. I've never played it, but I want to. It's
Likewise.
Awesome. All right, so please let us know, guys, if I miss any more of those Twitch super chats. They're difficult to spot in the chat for me, so I will. Please let me know if one pops by and we don't talk about it. So why was the Forgotten Realms a flagship setting? Well, it was company owned, unlike Greyhawk,
right?
Unlike Dragonlance.
They bought it for $5,000.
They bought it for $5,000. It was very genre flexible, high fantasy, not as constrained as Ravenloft, not as grim as Dark Sun, not as weird as Planescape. It was very easy to drop in any adventure concept. Some might say almost too easy, because what would then happen is, especially in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons era, Advanced and Second Edition, what would happen is that TSR and then Wizards of the Coast, they would create. No, this was all TSR. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is all TSR. So during the TSR era, they would create a bunch of settings and throw them out there like spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. We got the Horse Lords, which was we got Karatur, we got Maztica. You know, we got all these like really weird niche settings, and they'd come out and they'd kind of flop, and then TSR would be like, okay, well, that's now part of the Forgotten Realms. It's over here. It's over there. It's, you know, it's very far away from the Sword Coast. It's very far away from Cormyr, but these places are in the Forgotten Realms. So now they're all under that banner, and then we'll help. You know, I assume it was meant to, because sales would go up. Do you remember this at all, Vera? Do you remember any of these settings that I'm talking about?
I have heard of these settings.
Yeah, they're definitely from the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons era, the second edition. Second edition, I guess, is also TSR. So yeah, second edition D&D was also a part of this, where they had just throw out tons of settings and then be like, oh, retroactively, that's Forgotten Realms.
Well, like Wizards began to really prioritize fleshing out setting. Like they care a lot about having like a broader narrative that is sort of cohesive. They do this in even Magic the Gathering, right? Like this is just sort of their mentality as a company, is to have a cohesive whole or two that they can flesh out and build off of.
And the Forgotten Realms was big enough that new developers could just pick a spot on the map, design something. It was so well supported that most D&D players knew about it. This was not Blackmore. This was very much front and center. You want to read this one?
Yeah, Necroplayer, thank you so much for the super chat. I wish Baldur's Gate had a good tabletop module. Descent into Avernus is fine, but isn't actually a Baldur's Gate module, and it's kind of poor without heavy rework. I can see that. I feel like good module design for Baldur's Gate has a couple of natural challenges. Like you got to deal with the politicking, which is I can speak from experience, challenging to bring across in a way that is useful to all parties, because again, like all sorts of parties can wind up in this setting, and that is a challenge for certain styles of play. Like you would need a big book, a couple of big books, possibly doable, but would need to be like inherently very flexible, right?
Yeah, if you're looking for this kind of thing, Necroplayer, my suggestion would be to go to Ed Greenwood's books, not the novels. I'm specifically talking about the Volo's guides to various places. Those are just excellent, and they're chock full of great adventure seeds. Maybe not full adventures, but definitely adventure seeds, great NPCs, really interesting locations. It gives you that feel. I think that's where I would point you to, is the Volo's guides. They're just really, really good. It's fun to read. All right, so we talked about the history of the Forgotten Realms in the real world, but we haven't talked about the realms themselves very much. There again, so much lore, just stupid amounts of lore.
Well, you said it yourself. Thematically, the Forgotten Realms is kind of about layering. Like beneath the soil, there are forgotten realms. That's the idea.
Well, there's one of the reasons people really like it is because it has endless hooks. There's 30 years of development on this project, so you have just tons of material: ruined empires, city intrigue, weird cults, frontier exploration. There's just basically something for everyone, which is both a strength and a weakness. Forgotten Realms has a lot of flavor, but it also feels, in many ways, I would argue, and I think Vera, please disagree or agree, I think it feels very generic.
Well, I think it feels generic because it is the setting for Dungeons and Dragons, which has gone on to define like all of this stuff. It's like looking at Citizen Kane and being like, wow, amazing. They did a wipe cut. They put lighting in the scene. Wow, which was a big deal at the time.
Right, like at the time, it was huge. Yeah.
I do think that another reason that it might feel that way is because it marked a transition in style of play, right? Because this was the move from the dungeon delving era into a more, I would say, narratively focused style of play, where characters had like personal lives outside of the dungeons beneath Castle Greyhawk. They had active lives with all sorts of salacious stories that didn't make it to the main setting books. Like this was a stepping off point for different energies of play, and I think they're kind of all represented here.
Yeah, it's the other thing I think that is both good and bad is that Forgotten Realms is a very flexible tone.
Yes.
You've got the absolutely grimdark politics of the Drow in the Underdark. You've got the lighthearted travelogues of Volo, the traveling, bard. You've got the sexy time adventures of the Knights of Myth Draenor, which are very, they read like player characters doing player character bullshit, which is pretty great. You've got pulpy, whimsical, heroic, epic, and gritty. Like all of those things you can find in different places of the Forgotten Realms. And it's good because it makes the setting very flexible, but it's also bad because it makes the tone very muddled and difficult to describe from any high level overview.
Yeah, and this is a problem that has reproduced itself many times throughout other settings. Like Golarion is infamous for this, right? Like there's a very different energy in, say, like, I don't know, we're in the Mwangi jungle, say, like from like right east of it, where you have like the human chattel farms where Zon-Cathon initiates are processing people for the undead masses of Geb. Like that's like bordering each other, like totally different vibe. You have like swashbuckling jungle exploration versus like Nightmare Farm.
Well, I learned most of what I know about Golarion from the Owlcat games. So I know the Stolen Lands pretty well, and I know the World Wound pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those areas have very different tones. So, yes. Golarion is, I think, in many ways, an evolution of a similar approach to the Forgotten Realms.
Which is why I think it was an effective competitor. Because it's my issue with Golarion is that your genre changes dramatically the second you step over a border. Okay. Like it's very much built like that because each country would have its own little spot, and then they'd be quite different.
I have to read this one. Please let me read this one.
Yeah, please do, Avani DK. Thank you for the cheer. Thank you.
Avani DK, great to see you. First time to see you, but I love it. My favorite setting in the old TSR days was always Birthright, though not the kingdom management part of it. But I love the fact that it was low magic, so it made sense that the PCs were the ones sent to kill the monster, instead of calling on the wizard that would have lived right next door in another setting. You, sir, Avani DK, you, specifically you, are a man of culture. Birthright is also my favorite D&D setting. And I cannot wait. I am chomping at the bit to talk about it on this show. Vera, you're going to see me go off because I just love Birthright so much.
Exciting. Like, I am a kingdom management enjoyer. I'll note this.
I love Birthright so much. I worked on the 3rd edition version of it for free. I didn't care if they didn't pay me. I wanted to work on it.
Let's go.
It was such a huge fan of this setting. So yes, stay tuned, Devani DK. We will be talking about Birthright. And Birthright is a very different setting to the Forgotten Realms. You are correct. It is low magic. It does have a lot less heroic or grand things going on, at least at the micro level. Like in the Forgotten Realms, it's a joke, but it's actually true. You can walk into any farmer's barn and he's probably got a +3 sword from his adventuring days under the hay in the top loft, just in case. Like, that's the Forgotten Realms. That's literally how high magic it is. Whereas Birthright is very much like a +3 sword. Well, that was carried by Count Gruber during the wars in Thurazor 800 years ago and was lost in the volcanoes of that region. And like it's far more of an important thing than it would be in Forgotten Realms. And some people love that high fantasy approach. Other people, prefer a little more low fantasy, like myself and you. So we will have to get into it. He says, you should have known it based on my username. Yes, Ivani. Yes, of course. I should have. Ivani DK. Ivani is one of the gods in the Pantheon in Birthright. She is the goddess of knowledge and light and reason. And she has many different names because all the different cultures have different names for the gods in Birthright. So it's pretty cool.
Which is cool. I like that.
Yes. Birthright mentioned in 2026. Birthright is the redheaded stepchild. It is absolutely the redheaded stepchild of all the D&D settings. All right, so why do people love the Forgotten Realms? Well, everybody has their own headcanon, and that's okay. Like, it is perfectly fine to ignore the big meta plot events, the spell plague, or the time of troubles. You can roll the clock back to any part of that favorite era, and it's fine. Nobody cares. There's generally not a toxic Forgotten Realms fandom, which is pretty refreshing, honestly. You could argue that the Forgotten Realms is a hot mess of lore and conflicting themes. And it is definitely not exactly tidy, but people like the fact that you can pick and choose what you like and leave out the other parts, which I definitely do when I run things in Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, like, it's a opportunity to do basically anything, which is in some ways a great achievement for a setting, right? Like, when you have any tonal range, like, you could run a swashbuckling naval campaign up and down the Sword Coast. You can run a campaign that starts in chains in the Underdark. You can do all sorts of things, and they'll feel very different, and they'll be very tonally different, and they will allow for different kinds of characters and relationships and ideas.
The Forgotten Realms also has an incredibly strong sense of place. And what I mean by that is, again, we're primarily talking about Faerun, the one individual continent. Because if you go outside of that, if you talk about Karatur or Mastika, nobody really cares. I hate to be that guy. I have yet to see anybody who cares that much about Mastika or the Steppes or the Horde Lands or various other places. It's almost
someone's going to be very upset out there, Ross.
Probably, and you know what? Come at me. It's fine. Like, comment on. Go to our Discord. I'll actually put a link up in the chat. Go to the Discord and tell me I'm wrong. But as far as I'm aware, like, most people just do not care. So when you talk about Faerun specifically, there are some incredibly iconic spots. Most of the time, these are things like cities, but the Underdark in Forgotten Realms is like the Underdark. It is the Underdark that everyone uses as a measuring stick against all other versions of the Underdark. Menzo Baranzan, the Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale. These are just Neverwinter. All of these places are deeply iconic because of the amount of lore and development they've received. The Sword Coast in general is one of the best, and I will say this, like, with some authority, is one of the best places for a new DM to like learn how to run games, because there's so much going on and so many interesting places to explore and things to see and people to talk to. the Sword Coast is fucking amazing. Like, if Ed Greenwood has nothing else he can be proud of, the Sword Coast is a damn good adventure set. I have a map of it on my wall. I love it. I also have a Birthright map on my wall.
Strong.
What do you think, Vera? Are these the ramblings of an out of touch old man, or am I hitting some targets?
No, this speaks to the strength of the setting. Like, again, these are the same reasons Golarion succeeded. This is at the heart of what makes a good default setting, is that you can express all sorts of things. You can see all sorts of people. You can run as you please. You can find inns for different kinds of narratives. You can choose from different periods of the setting to better enable the kind of play that you want. The fact that the community for it is like nice is a wonderful bonus, but when it's only arisen recently, as we've seen the online scene for this stuff develop, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
So here's a fun thing about Golarion, because you keep bringing it up, and I think that's a good comparison to make. Golarion to me is not something that I really was that into until I played Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, the games by Alcat. And those games lent those areas of Golarion a lot of emotional weight. They told stories with strong characters and really strong arcs and really strong tones and themes and tropes. And it just hit me, and it was like, okay, I'm going to carry this with me, and I'm going to remember how cool and how deep and how complex the Stolen Lands are and the Whirlwind. Well, Forgotten Realms has that in spades.
Yes.
Forgotten Realms has so many novels, so many computer games. There is a ton of emotional weight to these areas, these very iconic spaces within the Forgotten Realms. Like one of our own super chats was earlier talking about, like, I want something that explores Baldur's Gate in a way that doesn't suck, right? Like, they want that.
You're talking about sense of place, and that's I think it's a similar mentality. What's so special about the Forgotten Realms is that they predicted this. Like, Greenwood's development angle anticipated the style of play that would come to define tabletop role-playing games overall, right? And that mentality is what led to the development of the Forgotten Realms, this idea that the setting should enable the player's characters to have interconnected and complex lives outside of the battlefield. This was sort of revolutionary because it was coming in right after Greyhawk, right? Which was barely acknowledging the existence of a world outside the dungeon. And this, it really marked a shift and sort of enabled that shift and was in tune with what would come to shape the scene. Like, it was ahead of its time.
Well, if people react well to this episode, I think we should cover some of these other settings because Greyhawk is an important setting to discuss.
Yes, it mattered. Yes,
very.
I'm not trying to talk shit. Just it was a different mentality.
No, I mean it's fair to say that Greyhawk is important, but it's also pretty bland. We should talk about like what the parts of Greyhawk are that are not bland and why people should explore Greyhawk at some point.
It is a focused setting though, in a way that
yes,
the Forgotten Realms are not.
And when you talk about the known worlds / Mystara, because that is also a world that grew out of some very bland original products. Keep on the Borderlands, for example, is where we get the very beginnings of the known world. But anyway, those are for future episodes. So the rough consensus on what's great about the Forgotten Realms: huge lore, flexible tone, iconic locations, lots of fiction or computer games to draw on, and tons of ready-made material and great community support. Those are the pros. What do you know, Vera, of any common criticisms of the Forgotten Realms?
That there is too much shit going on.
Yes, that is one of the issues.
You have a lot of very densely packed information, and as the GM, you have the challenging goal of keeping things separate and deciding what not to include or allude to, because you have the challenge of having like 1,000 loose ends your players can pull at, especially if they are familiar with the setting, because one of the challenges when you're running the default setting is everybody kind of knows what's going on.
The Forgotten Realms is one of those places that if you don't focus on something iconic, if you don't go to Waterdeep, and instead go to Daggerford, or if you decide to go check out the Dale Lands, which there are places that are very underdeveloped, and it can feel very generic. It can feel very kitchen sink fantasy, because literally everything is here somewhere in the Forgotten Realms. Nothing can feel there. It can feel like there's very little that's actually distinctive outside of the iconic locations and the iconic NPCs. Like Dark Sun and Planescape are far more distinct. Like that has a soul. That whereas Forgotten Realms kind of has a very fragmented soul, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And we got a super chat from Niville. Wow, we got a lot of new people super chat today. I love it. So he says, "Gotta respect Ed putting in all his fetishes. Not gonna lie." yeah, he let his flag fly, brother, and I am also proud of him for that.
This is the key to good world building.
This is also the part of the show where I say super chats are the absolute best way to support the channel, support Lorebeards Roleplaying, support the hosts. We very much are grateful to everyone who chooses to give us a super chat, because it enables us to continue making these shows. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Overloaded and contradictory lore is a thing that a lot of people say is a problem, because everything has been defined in some of the areas that are most common to the point where you're like, wow, how is this coherent at all? Is one of the common complaints. And it can also feel very intimidating. It can actually make a DM feel very boxed in, because he might say, okay, I'm going to set a game in Daggerford, which feels like a random village, but there's actually like 3 adventures and 2 novels in Daggerford. And so your players might be like, hey, where's this guy? Where's this thing? What about that?
It's a place where like familiarity with the setting runs into the density of information that can be found at any given place, because like their expectations are harder to manage. People might feel cheated if they don't get to see the iconic character they wanted to. It is a really well treaded and explored setting, and that means that there's a lot you can run into, or expectations that can fail to be met, and it's something that has to be navigated table by table.
One other thing that people tend to dislike is the meta plots. There was the Time of Troubles, there was the Spell Plague, there was the Sundering, and that's just 3. There are more. I think 3rd edition had a big giant city emerge from the Plane of Shadow, and that was a big, massive deal. And it just suffice to say, the meta plot. This was also an issue that would happen in the 90s with White Wolf. They had a lot of issues with their meta plots, if you recall.
Yes. White Wolf had there were there were a number of issues over at White Wolf.
So meta plots, as a game designer, I'm here to say that I think you need to handle meta plots very carefully and very. You don't want to go overboard. You like 1 every 5 years at most is like my suggestion to anybody thinking about, hey, you know what the setting needs? A meta plot. So
it's easy to overwhelm your players, also because they sort of always signal change. It's bad to always have constant upheaval in the setting people are trying to run their damn game in.
Well, and it's important to point out that the setting has gone through 3 different corporate hands. It started out TSR, then went to Wizards of the Coast, then went to Hasbro's version of Wizards of the Coast. And each time, the design team, the feel of the Forgotten Realms each time was like, okay, this is ours now. This is, change is just going to happen. And regardless of what came first, we're going to change it to fit our vision. And that is not always, again, I'm an evangelist for the gray box, right? I love the gray box. But I also don't mind some of the later versions of Forgotten Realms, but they do. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that's stupid. Whenever you're going through it and say that was a change that didn't need to be made. There is another issue we need to bring up. Something that's both good and bad about the Forgotten Realms. And you've probably heard this, Vera. There are a lot of really, really powerful named NPCs in the Forgotten Realms. Some of them,
yes.
Some of them are extremely important to the setting, like Elminster the Wizard. Several of them are wizards, if I should say. Illustrial, Kelvin, Blackstaff, Alistair, the wizard who created the Undermountain. There's just a lot of them are really super powerful wizards. Now, this is good because it gives you, like, you know, guys you can name check, and people are like, oh, Lord Pirgaron, he's that paladin who's on the Lords of Waterdeep. He's one of the Lords of Waterdeep. He's the only known open Lord of Waterdeep, or at least that was true for a long time. No longer true thanks to these retcons and changes and whatnot, changes in the timeline. But yeah, it's good that you have these characters because they can be a touchstone. But it's also bad. How is it bad to have all these super high level NPCs running around, Vera?
Well, it creates a certain narrative question, which is, why don't we ask the guy who can solve our problem with one of his 50 spells per day to do this for us very nicely? And it creates, I would say, weird patterns that I refer to as Mother May I, wherein you're trying to navigate access to the NPC who can solve the problem, to ask if maybe the NPC will be willing to solve the problem, and then you get a question the NPC. It creates a weird, convoluted quest line that avoids the main thrust of the plot, which is go here and do this. Like, it turns into a weird pattern where meta knowledge comes into play because the characters don't know this person can help them, but the players sure do. It invites roundabout solutions that drag in fan favorite characters because the players want to see them. It also kind of complicates the plot sometimes because maybe this character should care about the overarching narrative and there needs to be a reason why they won't get involved. All of this creates a burden on the GM, which can be stressful.
Well, specifically, for a very long time, this was called the Elminster problem. And the reason why it was called the Elminster problem is because Elminster, as Ed Greenwood's self-insert character, is simultaneously like the greatest wizard of the setting. He's essentially the Gandalf of the setting. But he also seems to, like, well, the way I describe it is he marks the fall of every sparrow, like, to use a biblical phrase. Elminster seems to know everything about everyone at all times. He seems to know what the fuck is going on. And so that question that Vera brought up, like, you know, why does the wizard just handle this, became, for a lot of reasons, like, why doesn't Elminster just handle this? He knows about it, almost certainly. He's powerful enough to do something about it. And even if he's not, he knows people who can and do. For example, Elminster is known to be the lover of the goddess of magic, just as a point of, you know, reference. He can literally be like, hey, honey, could you, like, deal with this for me? If he needed to. Yeah. So the Elminster problem is something that Forgotten Realms had to deal with for a very long time.
Well, it gets into, like, classic theological questions, right? Well, if God is omnipotent and all-knowing, then why is the evil Vilgax the Necromancer doing this right now?
Yeah, well, and it's not just Elminster. There's the Seven Sisters, which are all extremely powerful women adventurers that he often hangs out with or is lovers of occasionally from time to time. There's you know, Kelvin Blackstaff, who's he's one of the strongest wizards of the game, or strongest wizards of the setting. It did seem like, you know, it was rarely seen like there was a problem that would come up that Elminster couldn't solve. And if he couldn't solve it, then why send the B team to try? You know,
and you don't want your party to feel like the B team, right? Like, that's the other problem, is they're constantly in the shadow of these giant figures, these famous creatures.
I hate to say this, but this is true. In the late 80s and the 90s, all the way through to the early 2000s, probably up until 3rd edition, I would say, the Elminster problem was real. Game masters were struggling with it. They're like, this guy is, you know, usually the one people meet. If you play Baldur's Gate the first game, you meet Elminster within a few minutes of leaving Candlekeep, for example. I mean, this dude literally knows everyone and is always there. But fortunately, this has been a problem that has decreased over time and become less of an issue. So there you go. But it's definitely still a criticism. There's certain topics that Forgotten Realms handled really well, and certain topics they didn't handle very well at all. I will say that I think by and large, the pantheon of deities in the Forgotten Realms is one of the best. They have a lot of really interesting gods. They have a lot of really unique gods, Elistrae, who's the drow goddess of song and the moonlight. She's awesome. She's like a really great character. Written by Ed Greenwood. How do you know this? Because her priestesses dance naked as part of their rituals. I didn't come up with this, people. Don't blame me.
Wow, thanks, Ed. Very cool.
But she is a very cool goddess, and
Yes.
there's tons of really great. The pantheon is just excellent, and those named characters we mentioned, some of them are really interesting. Some of them are really, really cool. I could talk for a long time about how cool Mirth the Moneylender is in Waterdeep, for example.
But that's the problem: is if they're cool and they're powerful, then like, why wouldn't we get them involved?
That, I mean, I'm trying to talk about the good part here, but you're right. You're right. That doesn't necessarily help.
The more likable, interesting you make them, the greater the challenge becomes. If the like super powerful character is this horrible bastard, then naturally you have a reason to not involve them, or if you do, it'll be the mark of an even more complicated and dangerous quest. That is not always the case here.
Forgotten Realms also, to its discredit, Forgotten Realms also heavily leaned into that early D&D approach that certain species are just evil, period. The Drow in the Forgotten Realms, up until very recently, were a single monolithic Lolth-worshipping evil culture. With the one exception, being the star of like a dozen novels, that would be Drizzt Do'Urden, who would constantly be called out as the only good Drow. Then there's how tieflings are treated, or how orcs are. There are no good orcs in the Forgotten Realms. I think I believe there are some attempts to modernize this in the Forgotten Realms, but I have heard them. The way people describe it is it's awkward at best. To try and retcon, hey, there's actually good Drow, and they've been here this whole time. But yeah, it's Forgotten Realms is very much that place where certain species are just flat out bad. And some of the attempts to make them not necessarily evil but misunderstood has led to what people describe as sanitizing what used to be a fairly obvious bad guy. For example, there's a goddess called Loviatar, who's the goddess of pain and poison. Okay, like her priestesses carry whips. That's their main weapon. And
wow.
I'm not going to comment on the fetish part of that. But I will say that that's pretty obviously evil, right? Like that's clearly bad. Right? And I'm not sure that changing it to be like, well, there are only some of the priestesses of Loviatar evil. I'm like, you're worshiping the goddess of pain and poison. How is that at all? I mean, I'm sure there are writers out there who could write an excellent story about how it's actually misunderstood. But me personally, like my brain just cannot figure that out.
To me, this is like one of the great questions of, I suppose it's a problem kind of specific to D&D, of tone and of like ethical complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you say, like, okay, here are the gnolls. The gnolls are monsters. The gnolls attack people and eat them. You can fight the gnolls. Your players go, yeah, let's beat them up. And they'll get stoked and they'll make plans. If you then introduce the toddler gnoll who is confused and upset that you've burned down their village, this creates a moral quandary your players might not have expected or might not enjoy. It is easier to have a tonally upbeat campaign when you have overtly evil and uncomplicated enemies. When you introduce like moral complexity and your villains are easier to empathize with than some of your allies, your players might not enjoy what that leads to.
Yeah, well, that's a whole topic we could discuss too. Is like the idea of the monolithic evil species. That's actually part. We should just do a show on fantasy species in general. Like that would be part of that topic.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting to that. Like that, I think that's a nice accompaniment to this like tropes of species discussion. Like that might be like the cohesive whole, but it is relevant here because it affects a lot to do with the game. It changes the feel, the tone. It changes the style of the art. Even it changes the kind of scenarios that are depicted. It means that your range of enemies is either easier to negotiate with because they are people with motivations that are reasonable, or more narrow because they are foul beasts or like the few true cosmically evil things out there.
Right. I may have missed. Somebody Morning to Chris is pointing out I got Leviathan mixed up with Talona, who's the goddess of plague and poison. I think I want to say Leviathan also uses poison, but I could be wrong. Anyway, Morning to Cresta says Talona is a great example of the goddess of plague and poison. If you don't at least pay lip service to her, you're getting overrun by rats and your sewers are full of vermin. You cannot deal with poison in any way without touching on her worship. This is actually a point I need to bring up. The gods of the Forgotten Realms are very active. They're real. They're powerful. They're interventionists. They like to get involved in shit. Most of the stories of the Baldur's Gate series are actually about one of the gods, Baal, the Lord of Murder, and his children that he has sired across the Forgotten Realms. Like it literally a Zeus, like, I'm going to go around and create a whole bunch of kids. And this is not an uncommon thing for the gods to just show up and walk around. During the time of troubles, nearly all of the gods showed up and walked around on Faerun. You could just go up to Tamora and be like, hey, how's it going? And she'd be like, well, it sucks. I'm stuck down here on Faerun for a while, but what's your story? Yeah, you could literally have conversations with the gods. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Again, some of the gods are really interesting and cool in the Forgotten Realms, but it does lend that same, like, there are that feeling, like, if we were talking about Elminster, it does lend that feeling that there's all these very super powerful beings watching what's going on from a distance, and it does remove some of that feeling of agency and risk that makes adventuring interesting. Vera, what's your opinion?
Well, yeah, it's the Elminster problem again. It's a challenge that shows up in a lot of fantasy writing, which is how to present the divine, how to deploy the divine. When you can have a conversation with the god, they no longer feel like a god in a lot of ways, at least not in the Abrahamic sense that sort of dominated the Western canon. You're now like in the realm of the Grecian gods, where they are people with flaws, which I think is more archetypal of a lot of the D&D settings, wherein the gods have stories about them doing things that are very human-esque, humanoid, and they can be persuaded, or in the case of Elminster, married and wedded. There are...
Yep.
Well, there are examples of like people becoming the gods too. There's all sorts of narratives about
that.
The
time of troubles. 3 adventurers became gods. Kalemvor and Cyric were just adventurers, and then this third lady, Midnight, replaced Maestra for a while, and then Maestra replaced her. So yeah, there's adventurers have become gods in the Forgotten Realms.
It's a tonal impact on the setting, right? It feels very different than like interpreting limited signs and the gods being like removed from the mortal affairs, which also is very convenient narratively when the gods have a limited impact. Like in Warhammer, we straddle this a little bit. Like the elven gods are a little more elven. The human gods seem human, and they can be communicated with more directly. But even then, there's a layer of removal that is quite distinct from D&D, where you can like cast guidance and God is like, here is your glowing arrow, behold my child, detective vision, like a slightly different energy, right?
Well, then there's the ancestor gods of the dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy, which are fascinating to talk about.
I really like those.
A very different kind of god. Oh my gosh.
A super chat from Iceveins88. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ross, would you like to read this one?
Yes. Gnolls are just misunderstood. A bag of treats and calling them a good boy goes a long way. Very good, Ice Fades. Somebody actually mentioned this in the chat earlier, that are kobolds dogs or lizards? Do you know where that comes from?
Well, it comes from whether or not you're Japanese.
Yes, precisely. In Japan, they've decided that kobolds are dogs, and they draw and sorry, they depict, I should say, they depict kobolds as very canine in all of the Western fantasy things that touch on them. Whereas in the West, in USA and Britain and other places, they're usually depicted as lizards with draconic elements to them. So I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, I think that stretches back to like the very early editions of D&D, where some of the art could have kind of gone either way.
Yeah, well, certainly. If you look at the very early black and white Monster Manual kobolds, you're like, I'm not sure. That could be a dog. It could be a lizard.
This is a creature. Although this works on like a lot of different kinds of creature.
Right.
I'll put it like that.
Gnolls are almost always canine. So there's that.
Mm-mm.
Thank you, Ice Veins. Appreciate the super chat.
Thank you so much.
So, yeah, fun fact, Vera.
Yeah.
In the Forgotten Realms, atheism is actively punished. Did you know that?
Wow.
No, if you neglect the gods, you have a very grim fate after death. There's a place called the Wall of the Faithless, where any unclaimed souls are trapped in the afterlife because you didn't worship a god. Too bad for you. Sucks to be you. You get to squat on the Wall of the Faithless forever.
Well, to be fair, the idea of being atheistic in that kind of setting is like absurd, right? Like the idea that anyone would be is...
I just find that a very weird, like, is Ed Greenwood? Does he dislike atheists? I'm like, is that a Jeff Grubb thing? I don't know. Is this intentional, or did somebody just write it and thought it sounded cool? And I don't know. We're in a weird place now where I'm like, atheism in Forgotten Realms. This is just awful.
Well, it's nonsensical too, though. It's like, how are you an atheist in this setting where you can like call God and ask them for their opinion? Like,
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. There is one of the things that's really fascinating about the Forgotten Realms is how magic works there. Because in the Forgotten Realms, it's called the Weave. The Weave is this invisible fabric through which mortal people access magic. It is overseen by the goddess Maestra, and there is a mirror universe version of that called the Dark Weave, which is overseen by Shar. I think it's overseen by Shar. Maybe it's not by Shar. I have to look that up. I think it might be Shar, but it might be somebody else.
This is very different than the Weave in Warhammer, which is more like the balance of life. This is like juice.
And the Weave can change. The Weave, actually, it's part of the Spell Plague, which was a major world-shaking event. One of the meta plots for the Forgotten Realms is when Maestra got sick, and all of magic got weird because of that. Because it all filters through Maestra. There's also a god called Azuth. Now, Azuth is the god of wizards and spellcasters. He is not the god of magic. He's the god of wizards. It's a very fine line. That's all I'm saying right there. Maestra is the goddess of magic. Azuth is the god of wizards and sorcerers. But yeah, magic is incredibly ubiquitous in the Forgotten Realms. Would you also agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so.
And I honestly think this is the core theme of the setting. Magic wands, portals, spellcasters are very, very common, especially in any ancient sites or major city. I said earlier that you could go find a random farm, and in that random farmer's barn, there's probably a +3 sword from his adventuring days. I feel like that is not inaccurate. I feel like that is actually a pretty good description of the kind of ubiquity that magic and magic items have.
Well, like this is your classic, like very high magic setting, right? Like you can, it's just such a commonplace thing. It is strange to not have access to magic. It is a default problem-solving tool.
It is just a big thing, and it is probably the one feature that defines the Forgotten Realms more than anything else. Is just how easy access, how easy it is to access magic in the setting. Any major city has magic item vendors. You can just go buy them. which this has been adopted. I mean, you look at Critical Role, Tal'Dorei, they also do this. A lot of other settings have adopted the idea that you can just go buy magic items because they're so common that you can just purchase them. They're on the market. There are spellcasters everywhere. You go into that same small village where that farmer has his +3 sword. His daughter or his niece is probably a low-level caster of some kind, whether a priest or a cleric or a sorcerer or a wizard or a bard or something of that nature. There's also big factions in the Forgotten Realms. You have the Harpers, you have the Zentarim, you have the Lords of Waterdeep, and various other, or the Lords Alliance, I guess is what it's called now, right? Which is anyway. There's major factions that get involved and run things behind the scenes, or sometimes openly, in the Forgotten Realms. So you could be walking around in a city and just doing your normal adventure stuff, and then run into somebody who's an agent of the Harpers, and that recontextualizes everything. Because the Harpers have their own specific agenda, and they have their own specific history, and they have their own rivals and their enemies. And you can get caught up in this very easily. The Dragon Cult, thank you. Fidel Cashflow says the Dragon Cult does silly things. Yeah, the Dragon Cult does do silly things because they're responsible for turning dragons into liches because they worship dragons like gods. Wonder what happens to their souls. Do they go to Tiamat, or do they go to the Wall of the Faithless because dragons aren't gods?
Maybe it depends. They're god dragons.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. Oh, Wesley, did I get that wrong? Is there two separate things? The Dragon Cult and the Cult of the Dragon, are those separate things? Okay, well, I apologize. I thought we were talking about the one that does the Dragon Lich stuff. So anyway. Yeah. So there's a lot of factions in the Forgotten Realms, and that is also a big aspect of playing there, because you are not just dealing with monsters and quests. You also have a lot of politics going on with these different organizations, and what they're all striving to gain dominance for. But these iconic locations add a lot of value to the setting. Something I think I've mentioned before, Vera, is that there's this really great project that maps the super criminals of Gotham City onto Waterdeep.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's so awesome. I was just like, holy shit, that recontextualizes Waterdeep into a place I would love to adventure. Like, I don't mind Waterdeep. Waterdeep is cool. But making Waterdeep a version of Gotham is just kind of amazing. Like, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, please.
Well, I already think of Waterdeep as like a hub of magical crime, right? So I think that pulling from that kind of structure can work quite nicely.
I think that would improve my experience of Waterdeep, would be to Gotham it up. In case anybody's out there and is wondering what to do with Waterdeep, you can find it on the internet. There's a place that does this, and it's fantastic. We've got a super chat from Vani DK. Would you like to read this one?
So much. Thank you so much for the cheer. Fun fact for the Shadow Weave, it first appeared in the novel The Shadow Stone, which was supposed to be set in Birthright. But because it was canceled, the novel was put in the Forgotten Realms. Okay.
That's a true fact. In Birthright, there's an alternate dimension called the Shadow World that kind of overlaps and overlays with reality, and certain people can travel back and forth between them. And Richard Baker is a designer, very, very famous designer, who worked on a whole bunch of stuff for TSR. One of the things he worked on was Birthright. He wrote 2 novels for Birthright, Falcon and the Wolf and Shadow Stone, which eventually became a Forgotten Realms novel. As Avani points out here, he's 100% correct. That is where we get the Shadow Weave, is actually inspired by Birthright.
Interesting. I'm a big fan of like Shadow Realms and so on. It appeals to my edgy little heart.
Oh, wait till we talk about Birthright.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun on that episode. Anyhow, so where were we? Right. So the key regions of the Forgotten Realms. We've mentioned a lot of them already. The Sword Coast, which is also called the North, because the coast runs all the way up to Icewind Dale. This is home to places like Neverwinter, Icewind Dale, Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, and encompasses a frontier region called the Savage Frontier. It's very cool. You can find just absolute shitloads of adventure in the Sword Coast. It is the main stage, if you will, for the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, I would say that like almost every iconic part of the setting is on that coast.
Most. The Underdark, obviously, is not. And the thing about the Sword Coast is it balances urban intrigue with frontier zones, with dungeons, with trade routes, with invasions, of monsters. It's got all the big pieces of cake for your birthday party of D&D. Like that's a terrible metaphor, but you know what I'm saying.
I like the idea of having like multiple kinds of cake at the birthday party. Like now it's complete.
I gotta say, I've always been an ice cream cake guy, but
strong.
Then you got the Heartlands and Cormyr, Sembia, and the Dale Lands are far more classic fantasy. It's very more, knights and dragons and forests and castles and small villages overshadowed by ancient ruins.
Still coastal fantasy though. Still another like pocketed, rugged coast.
That's right. Good but complicated kingdoms are what you'll find in that area. A lot of noble intrigue, a lot of dragons and stuff like that. It's again very classic fantasy. The Dale Lands are this small, semi-independent communities that are welded together by common culture, and they are surrounded by forests and threats. Shadowdale is the most famous. It's the home of Elminster. And then there's the Underdark, which we talked about earlier as one of the most. It's the best Underdark in all of D&D. It's just really, really good. The Underdark is a vast underground area full of drow cities, Dwergar, Illithids, Aboleths, even stranger shit. The drow, for a while, there was actual like radiation down there. Like the drow, all the stuff they made was like exposed to this source of radiation, and that's why it was like so powerful. But it crumbled in sunlight because the radiation like went away, or sunlight destroyed it in some weird way.
Well, it's so fascinating because it's its own ecosystem with complicated social rules and different species that thrive there. You've got myconids and so on. You've got sort of Neblin. You've got whole ecologies of lichen and things. It's very cool. It's very cool. It is I think a good place to tap in for those who are excited by like fantasy biology.
Right. Outside of these areas, you also have the stuff we mentioned before, Karatur, which was the original Oriental Adventure, so it's fantasy Japan with a little bit of fantasy China. Mazkika, which is very much conquistadors versus Mayans in flavor. There's Zakara, which is Zakara is the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights setting, 1001 Tales. And there's the Horde Lands, which are Mongols along the Great Wall of China, basically. There's Chult, which is Jurassic Park, but like way worse with like all these like horrible diseases and bugs. The factions, we did briefly talk about them. We should get into them a little bit more because one of the things that I really liked about the Gray Box version is that Ed would often write in the idea that these secret societies, these factions, they were actively on the move. They were out there doing stuff. It was a way to kind of establish the idea of stakes in a ticking clock, because in a lot of the adventures in the Gray Box, you might be walking around and see a Zentarum wizard riding a wyvern flying overhead with a wand, like looking for a particular paladin to smite in the name of his group. And maybe that was the kind of encounter that you may not be prepared for. You might even be like a first level party and be like, holy shit, we can see this guy over here, It made the world feel kind of alive in a way that I hadn't really seen before.
Yeah, like one upside to the scale being so insane is that you feel like there's potential. You see that, you think, I want to be that guy. I want to do that thing. There is a certain appeal to seeing the heights you can aspire to.
Wes Luce says Chult is cool because it's an island of turtle people. Yes, turtles.
Well, yeah.
That is cool. I grant you, turtles are fun. And another one of those weirdo races that Necroplayer was talking about, wanting to see more of. Or was it Necroplayer or was somebody else? One of our chats. I apologize. Then we've got the Zentarum. Who are the Zentarum? They are this group of, well, what they are has changed over time, because originally they were very much bad guys. They were a mercenary network with connections to the undead and black magic, and wanting to they were the cackling Skeletor of the setting.
They smuggle. They work with bad guys. You can hire them to mug people. You can do all of this stuff. They've become a little more gray because that way players can hook into them.
Right. They were often blamed for anything that was like a subtle moment or a conspiracy. It's like, oh, there's a Zentarum behind it. They were basically they're basically, if you want to think of it as a crime network or a syndicate, just a little more darker and a little more magical. Then there's the Harpers. Vera, can you describe the Harpers?
Not well.
All right, I'm going to attempt it, but there's again, these were often the good guys, especially in the Ed Greenwood writing. Like the Harpers were where all the heroes hung out, and they were connected to the Harpers, which is kind of like a spy agency. It's a decentralized group of idealists trying to keep tyrants in check and preserve the balance. They were a lot of like 007 meets D&D. They were kind of that first version of the secret agent archetype.
Yeah, it's like very noble, but it's sort of loose, but they're all very cool. They're sort of bardic, but they it's that idea.
One of the reasons they were called Harpers is because like that jack of all trades was the bard back in the day. And bards, a lot of bards were Harpers, and a lot of Harpers were bards. So it's not all Harpers are bards, but a lot of them are.
I think it's the kind of thing that's meant to like be really easy in for player characters because they're so loose. You can just like say you're a Harper and do whatever. Like the idea is that it's a badge of esteem that lends like context to some odd NPC you meet, and like it works. It's like it's an in for narrative.
And for Baldur's Gate fans, Jaheira and Khalid are both Harpers. Montaron and Zar are both members of the Zentarum. All right, so then there's the Red Wizards of Thay. How familiar are you with these guys, Vera?
Not very.
The Red Wizards are often like the true final boss. They are bald. They are magic obsessed, often villainous. Wizard lords from the nation of Thay. They frequently show up as big bads or shadowy manipulators. The villain in Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, the film, is a Red Wizard of Thay.
And she's my strongest context for them, right? And she's she's the whole look, obviously. She's the pulling the string. She's distinctly bald. She has her master plan, which is very cool. Again, a great movie.
There are novels. I think Richard Lee Byers wrote some really good ones about Thay, if you want to go look at those. It's an interesting place, but it is ruled by these Red Wizards, and the Red Wizards are often, if it's not the Zentarum behind it, it's almost always a Red Wizard. So then there's the Cult of the Dragon, the Lord's Alliance. These are additional groups that drive the action, and they have their own agendas. Unless I want to get deep, I mean, I could define, I guess, more of the Cult of the Dragon and Lord's Alliance a little bit if I wanted to. Vera, we're okay.
Huh? Wait, what the?
Technical difficulties. Huh. There were briefly 2 Veras. Vera cloned herself. She's now in a brown zone instead of a purple zone. That's a green zone. It's changing color.
It's evolving.
The blood type is blue. It's an angel. I'd like the music starts playing immediately in my head. That was an Evangelion reference for people who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What else should we talk about with the Forgotten Realms? We got an hour left, and there's still a lot to cover. So where would you?
If you're talking factions, the Lord's Alliance probably matter. You mentioned them briefly. Like this is it's sort of straightforward.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. So the Cult of the Dragon, as I said before, these are the guys that worship dragons and want to create Draco Liches Are you familiar with Dracoliches?
Draconic witches.
That's basically what they are, yes.
Which is scary, which is bad. This is like a scary thing.
So yeah, they also believe that, or at least they used to believe that dragons were gods and worship them. That's why they're called a cult. It was a way to interact with dragons without having to actually interact with the dragon itself. You could interact with his minions, which included this cult. I liked them. I thought they were really cool. And I thought that they were a really good villain to use in ways if you wanted to highlight the presence of a dragon or the influence of a dragon. Because there are lots of dragons, many, many, many dragons in the Forgotten Realms. I think the Forgotten Realms has more subtypes of dragon than anywhere else. Because they got all the chromatics, they got all the metallics, they got the deep dragon and the blade dragon, and there's a whole bunch of them. So the cult of the dragon is very secretive, and they are, I guess, semi-religious at least. They're definitely evil. The cult of the dragon are definitely antagonists, and they're devoted to this prophecy that Faerun will one day be ruled by undead dragons, which is a weird thing to prophesy. I don't know. I mean, I would assume you'd have to be really high and be like, hey, be cool. It's undead dragons ruling everything.
That's the kind of prophecy nobody wants to hear.
I mean, how could that possibly go wrong? I don't see any downside to this. Traditionally, the cult of the dragon, they focus on serving dragons and trying to convince them to transform themselves into Dracoliches. They will offer all the necessary support and necromantic rituals required. And all they ask is that the dragon then protects them and watches over them. And in the future, when the dragons take over the world, they will be on their side. They were behind the plot to free Tiamat in the 5th edition adventure Tyranny of Dragons. So they are a recurring antagonistic faction. Have you played Cyberpunk 2077?
Yes, but I've not finished it.
Okay, well, the Cult of the Dragon reminds me very heavily of the Voodoo Boys in Cyberpunk 2077.
Okay.
Because the Voodoo Boys are convinced that the AIs will break through the Black Wall and take over the world, and they're like, we want to be on the winning side, which means we want to hang out and serve the AIs, and they try to contact these AIs behind the Black Wall to offer their services. And I was like, that feels like Cult of the Dragon.
Yeah, it's an interesting archetype where you can allude to this really impossibly strong villain throughout a campaign. It's smart writing. It's smart writing.
Then we get to I hate to say this, but to me, it's the least interesting of the factions. That's the Lords Alliance.
Damn.
I know. Being bland doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just means that they're lacking a little bit of flavor.
Well, they're diplomats. It's boring. Look how they're getting along. Oh, they've got a mercantile deal. Okay.
So why don't you talk about the Lords Alliance?
It's an alliance of lords. It's in different cities. That's what it is. It's what it is. It's literally.
It's in the name. It's just in the name.
This is why it's bland.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
It's like NATO. It
is like NATO. It absolutely is. It's like NATO.
Just a bunch of cities that get along.
Yeah, it's a political and military coalition of powerful city-states in the Sword Coast and the north, like Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter, Silvery Moon. By the way, Silvery Moon is that was a place if you want to visit a fun place, check out Silvery Moon. It's not as well traveled as some of the other places. Mirabar is also one of the cities. It's also really interesting. Anyway, and this group, the Lords Alliance, it was founded to protect trade and civilized settlements. Yeah, I mean it's pretty boring. I'd say this. It's kind of like a mix between NATO and the G7. It's a trade alliance too.
It is the kind of structure that probably makes sense to exist. Of course they have that, because why would you not have that?
The Lords Alliance, they oppose the Zatarum. They oppose the Shadow Thieves, which is a very large thief guild organization. They work together to fight orc hordes. and their agents typically just try to keep the trade routes running across the North and the Sword Coast. So, again, I'm sure a skilled game master or a skilled author could probably write something amazing about these people. They're just not interesting to me specifically.
They've got straightforward motives, and their structure resembles a real world organization. So it's a little less scintillating, but it makes sense. It works in the setting. It is something that can factor into a lot of plots and schemes. Like sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. I will not deny that it makes sense. All right, so that is a pretty good overview of the Forgotten Realms. Where should we start our deeper dive?
Well, we've tabled a few of the conceptual things for a more targeted fantasy race discussion, which I think is appropriate because that's easily an episode on its own.
Is there any lesser known places that you would tell people to check out that are awesome but hardly anybody knows about them in the Forgotten Realms?
There is a web series that it was my introduction to D&D.
Ooh, tell me more.
It's called The Unforgotten Realms, and this was a absurd, like, flash animated saga about being an adventurer and being a very bad adventurer and getting into mischief throughout the Forgotten Realms. And I didn't even realize it was a D&D thing until I was older. I was very young. How old is this? Unforgotten Realms. This was like a long running series for a while. And it was 2009. Yeah. So this was for the Escapist magazine. No, it was 2006 originally. Man, that was for me like one of my intros to D&D as a setting properly. This was like I think shortly before I got like really into buying this was around the time that I got into buying like a 3.5 edition books at the bookstore and just like hoarding them. I have fond memories of this. There's like 20. Oh my god, there's like 50 episodes of this. It must run for several years, but it was a Newgrounds thing, right? It was a cartoon that focused on the setting and satirized it. So I have very fond memories of this.
Well, yeah, there's some places that you should look at that are not necessarily on the Sword Coast that are really interesting. There's Lanton, which is a steampunk island of tinkerers, which is pretty cool. They're the worshippers of Gond, the Wonder Maker. Gond is the god of technology, basically. And there you can find clockwork stuff, early firearms. It's a steampunk enclave, which is really neat. There's also the Moonshae Isles, which is very very old Celt themed. Lots of mists, lots of clan conflict and things like that. It's an archipelago, and there you can find druids and standing stones and fey influence. It's just awesome. Unicorns, direwolves. There was this massive beast called Khazgaroth that threatened him. It's essentially the Forgotten Realms version of a kaiju almost, Khazgaroth.
Hell yeah.
And there's Elturel. And Elturel is interesting because it was a walled, strongly lawful good leaning city east of Baldur's Gate. And it used to be considered one of the safest and most devout cities in all of Faerun. It was famous for its Hell Riders, who were these knightly orders whose founding myth involves riding into Avernus itself, and the Companion, which was a magical second sun that once hung over the city and burned undead, which earned Elturel a reputation of a holy beacon of justice. However, the High Overseer of Elturel made a deal with an archdevil. The Companion was actually a diabolic device, and the entire city was dragged into Avernus, which was a layer of hell. You can find this in Descent into Avernus. It's a shame that it's called Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus because it sets up expectations like one of our commenters pointed out earlier. This is not a very good Baldur's Gate adventure, but it's a pretty good Elturel adventure. So there's that.
I quite like the Border Kingdoms, which are very similar to the Border Princes in Warhammer.
Are they? That's cool. Where you can just have anything you want.
It's a similar concept. There's a bunch of micro kingdoms. People are fighting things out. Very cool. Very cool. Similar narrative beats where you're trying to establish some kind of structure and then getting overthrown, etc.
And one of the main themes that has been carried all the way forward since the Gray Box is the idea that the Forgotten Realms are built on literal Forgotten Realms. There are ruins of ancient empires and civilizations everywhere. This is most commonly found in the Great Desert of Anurok, which hides many, many lost empires, including the ruins of Netheril, which was a massive, very powerful, magic-heavy civilization that had skyships and all kinds of weird stuff that they used magic for. And they were destroyed and left behind Anurok, the Great Desert. So you could find buried sites of power and things that you really don't want to wake up under the sands. It is cool because it's kind of a post-apocalyptic desert with a lot of really ancient super tech magic dungeons in it. And of course, surface nomads and strange magic storms and weird ass creatures running around. There are some very strange creatures running around in Iraq.
Yeah, it's similar. Not to keep like pulling in Galarian, but the mono wastes are a similar energy there, where it's a magical scarred desert that has all sorts of buried mysteries from ancient war. It's a cool energy.
Fun fact: Anurok, the Great Desert, is actually its northern border is a great glacier. You go directly from a massive glacier to a massive desert, which is one way to show that Netheril really screwed up. Right, that's what I like that geographic feature, because you look at the map and you're like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, and then you like read about Anurok, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it does make sense.
Environmental storytelling,
little bit. It doesn't hurt to have that kind of stuff going on. So where would you like to take this discussion, Vera? I've been guiding it a lot, so I'd like to have your thoughts.
I'm interested in impact and legacy, right? Because the Forgotten Realms have definitely shaped the direction of D&D, and I would say a lot of things in tabletop. And we touched on this a little bit already with the way that the meta events have set the standard for a lot of fantasy industry practices, with the way that the structure has influenced their successful settings for games. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not a stretch to say that this is like the most influential like tabletop setting.
No, I think that's very true. And I think, Golarion is, we keep coming back to it, but Golarion is one of the biggest examples. Golarion is essentially an advanced version of it. And we have a super chat from Avani DK. Avani, you're coming in like a steel chair today. I love it. Have you talked about the fact that Forgotten Realms is canonically connected to the real world? We did. We talked about that very early on, where in Ed Greenwood's when Ed Greenwood was designing it, he designed it as a parallel world tomorrow in a slightly different dimension. And there can be people that have crossed over in both directions. Ivani says Moharand is ancient Egyptians who traveled to Forgotten Realms and found that their gods suddenly were a lot more active. Elminster travels to Earth to buy beer. Yeah, that's from Pages of the Mages, which was an article series in Dragons Magazine by him, where he would talk about Elminster popping in, and the conceit of a lot of his articles, Ed Greenwood's articles, was that Elminster was literally traveling to his house to tell him about the Forgotten Realms, and he was just writing it down. He was like the scribe,
which is very cute.
No, yeah, for real. This is a good point, Ivani. We should have highlighted this, I guess, a little bit more. But yeah, in its original design, Forgotten Realms is connected to the real world, and you can go between it and Earth.
Well, as I understand, there was some like pressure to pedal off that a little bit, partly because of satanic panic things like the steam tunnel incident, but there is less emphasis on this now. But I think it was expressly the intent at one point. And this is like no longer in vogue. Like this sort of anticipates the current isekai trend, but I would say broadly in Western fantasy, this is like no longer the vibe people look for.
Well, I think it's been a very long time as the default of D&D fantasy. It was the primary home of published D&D adventures. When you picture a D&D world, you're probably thinking of something very much like Faerun. Big cities, active gods, long dead empires and ruins, and high magic, but still grounded.
I mean specifically the like accessible from Earth thing.
Oh, that, yeah. Okay.
I would say that, like, the energy of Faerun, like the high magic, it still remains like the archetype. Like, this has created the mythos, right?
Well, it's got a layered history that a lot of other settings have copied. The idea that there's the different ages of the world, and each of these ages has a story. That's been copied a lot.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's the first one. Obviously, Tolkien did it first. This is just an evolution of Tolkien's approach to his history of his world. But yes, when you think about a lot of D&D settings, they have that layered history, probably because they've seen that Tolkien idea filtered through the Forgotten Realms. And it also normalized the idea of the big metaplot events as a tool to advance the in-world timeline alongside a new rules edition, which has been copied by other IPs as well.
Yeah, that shows up in Warhammer now. Like, it's smart. It makes sense. It deals people in a broader sense. It signals things. Good for marketing.
Yeah, I think that's true. How do you feel Forgotten Realm has influenced the ways that other settings are written?
Well, I think that it really proved that having a kitchen sink approach could be valid, could be useful. I think that in some ways this has done damage to young writers, however. The Forgotten Realms as a setting is I would say, birthplace of the wikification of the setting, which is a challenge I've seen many of my students grapple with. So I teach high school. For context, I advise young writers, many of whom are interested in tabletop games or who are curious about like writing fantasy. And I have seen many times kids who start by writing out dozens and dozens and dozens of different countries and personalities and deities and locations and don't know what the story is going to be about.
Well, go ahead. Please.
And this mimics the end state of the Forgotten Realms, but not the process that got there, right? Because it sprung out of a spiraling narrative that was very focused on the needs of individual characters. It was very plot-driven, very emotionally charged. And they are seeing the final form of this and trying to reverse engineer that kind of narrative by building out this giant setting and then trying to narrow down from it. And I see a lot of kids struggle with this because I would say that a setting like the Forgotten Realms needs a wiki. You need resources to look stuff up. Like there's an entire website for Pathfinder, right? There's the entirety of the Archives of Nethys, which are basically necessary to running a game, right?
Well, helpful, very, very helpful, I would say. And the Forgotten Realms is, well, go ahead.
You don't have to use anything from any splat, but God help you if you're trying to do it with just the books. Like it's so much information to sort and tab and organize and record.
Fun fact: Galarian goblins are green. D&D goblins are orange. Yeah, I don't know why my brain is full of these weird little bits of trivia, but it is.
I've seen a lot of non-orange goblins though.
Pumpkin Historian asks a very interesting question. He says, is there one thing in the Forgotten Realms that you want to rewrite? For me, I want to rewrite that the human species is the elder race, not elder dwarfs, but are becoming less relevant.
So you'd want them to be like the sort of progenitor, but that has struggled in more recent years. There's an interesting narrative import there. Like you could do a few things. I think that having a preeminent race is a narrative definer a lot of the time. Like you see this in Warhammer, right, where the human species is sort of like overrun the old world, and there's a lot of tension with the elves over this, who see the Elth and Arvin as their territory, but the elves are in decline there, at least some of them are.
I think arguably all the different species of elf are in decline, but you know what? The whole Warhammer world is in decline because it all comes to an end. So there's that.
There is that. Well, yeah, this is a. I think when you have this kind of tension, it makes the narrative broadly darker. It makes things a little more politically tense in ways that some players might not enjoy.
Yeah, I think if I was going to rewrite something in the Forgotten Realms, I would probably rewrite Elminster. He's definitely Ed Greenwood's self-insert character, and I would, if I was going to rewrite him, I'd definitely involve Ed at some point because it is his guy. But I would want to rewrite him in a way that still makes him interesting without making him Mark the Fall of Every Sparrow and being, you know, a one-man solution to every single problem that you could possibly encounter. You need to give him a serious task that he cannot be called away from, or something like that. You need to give him some very, very good reasons not to get involved because it might draw the attention of other equally powerful people or beings. You know, I would want to work on that. I would want to make him interesting and fun and iconic, but less of a problem and more of something a game master can use as a fun or exciting revelation during the game.
I can see that. You're trying to solve the Elminster problem.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, that's always been something I've been thinking about.
I think I'd be interested to make the Drow more politically involved topside.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt.
I think it is strange that they are so withdrawn because given their position, there's no reason to not have more attempts at involvement or perhaps manipulation up top. I think that the seclusion is a little overplayed, perhaps. There's avenues there. We're gonna revisit some of these ideas when we talk about like fantasy race tropes, though.
So I did look it up, and the Time of Troubles, which was Forgotten Realms' first meta plot, does predate the World of Darkness. So it is basically the first big meta plot in all of role-playing games.
There you have it.
Yeah, fun fact. Do you want to talk about some of the really iconic characters aside from Elminster?
I do like Volo.
Let's talk about Volo. Who's Volo?
Volo is the preeminent bard. Volo is the storyteller. Volo is your guide to the world of monsters. Volo is the knower. Volo is a raconteur, a storyteller, an observer of things. Volo is a mouthpiece for some of the writers of the setting, perhaps, to discuss things in universe in a way that is very exciting and fun.
Yeah, we all have our favorites, I think. There's a book series by Elaine Cunningham, which covers a character called Erlyn Moonblade, who is a half-elf, who is a descendant of the queen of the Elven Realm, which is, I can't remember the name of it. I'll probably remember it in just like half a second. And she and her Moonblade she's a very interesting character because she's dealing with a lot of her, prejudice against her being half Elven and the pressure of people wanting to involve her in the politics of the elves. But she also has a really fascinating villain. I don't know if you've ever heard of the villain in her stories, Elaith Crowlnober, also called the Serpent.
Mm-hmm.
You've not heard of this?
I have heard of this.
So Elaith Crowlnober he's awesome because he's basically like, what if Eltharion was a mob boss? He was a very high ranked noble elf, and the Evermeet. Evermeet was the name of the place I was thinking of. Evermeet is the home of the elves and the Forgotten Realms. There's also Everesca, which is a colony, I guess you might say, like an enclave, but that's not on an island. That's on the mainland somewhere. But Elaith was a nobleman of Evermeet, and he became this infamous crime lord, one of the crime lords of Waterdeep, actually, one of the most infamous crime lords of Waterdeep. He's a very nuanced anti-hero, question mark. Like he's definitely an antagonist of Erlen Moonblade. And the weapon that she carries, she's named after the weapon she carries, which is called a Moonblade, which are these very important heirloom magic items from Evermeet. And he tried to claim it, but it rejected him. It judged his heart unworthy. So Erlen was the one who's judged worthy to carry it, and so he's very, he believes she is not worthy. even though the sword is judged her worthy, like he's got that, like a lot of that Loki energy, but he is a coldly ruthless, deadly, elegant, utterly pragmatic operator in the City of Splendors, which is another name for Waterdeep. He sometimes is an ally, sometimes is an enemy of Erlen, but he's always got this really fascinating mix of pride and cruelty and twisted honor and lingering loyalty to all of the elven traditions of Evermeet. This is why I'm saying he's like a dark reflection of Eltharion.
Mm-hmm. Which is great fun. If we're talking about Lords of Waterdeep, there's Xanathar also.
Oh, Xanathar. Yeah, let's talk about Xanathar.
I like Xanathar a lot.
Who is Xanathar?
Xanathar is a shadowy mob boss about Waterdeep as Gotham. Xanathar is why I think it's well suited to this kind of energy. Xanathar is a very sociable beholder.
He's paranoid, isn't he?
But by beholder standards, he is friendly and loving. So
right.
He's neurotic. He is an all-seeing, distant creature, but he will interact with you nicely and trade with you for things, and he runs the show. He's not like working in a dungeon zapping people. He is pulling strings. He is negotiating. He is doing diplomacy.
He's a blend of genuine danger and dark humor, because he has
a lot of fun.
Because he has a pet goldfish that he's obsessing over.
I think he's a really great example of a classic dungeon monster being brought in as a character that you can interact with nicely.
There's a guy called Manshoon. Have you heard of Manshoon? No. Okay.
The Manshoon, no.
Manshoon is the founding lord of the Zentarum. And he was infamous for making multiple clones of himself. At one point, they all woke up at once, which started a thing called the Manshoon Wars, as they fought amongst each other to become the one and only Manshoon.
And speaking of the one and only, it is true that it is a title that has been passed, but it is a name for the Xanathar. Xanathar is the Xanathar. Is this still the lore that it's like been passed down a lot? I know that we have still a beholder in the position of Xanathar.
Yeah. There's still definitely a beholder there. It's not the Xanathar, it's a Xanathar, is what you're saying?
I think there have been many Xanathars who are beholders, though.
This is a setting where clones can be a thing. Hallister has clones. Elminster has clones. Like it's just weird. Ice Veins. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah, Ice Veins, thank you so much for this here. In your personal opinion, what is the worst creature you can run into or fight as a party in D&D Rust monsters?
That's a good answer.
That's right. I think they're bad news.
I was going to say Adiugs, because they're almost always in the sewers, like the nastiest, stinkiest parts of the sewers, and they're basically like the D&D version of that critter in the trash compactor from Star Wars. Dianaga, I think, is the Star Wars term.
Anything that can charm you is pretty bad also. So this is my game design brain talking, but I think that like the worst feeling in any kind of turn-based RPG is losing your turn.
Yes, Lamias are good at that. I got once sorcelled by a Lamia, and my wisdom was reduced to 3. That was a fun scenario.
Oh boy.
No, I actually enjoyed it. I treated it as if my character was like just very impulse driven. And her daredevil nature came to the surface, and she was like, I'm gonna hide and watch these enemies to see what they do, but I'm not gonna do it from a safe distance. I'm gonna climb the tree right next to them and hide up there. Because I had a 3 wisdom.
That sounds like me all the time.
And then I rolled a nat 20, and the game master was like, fuck. We got a couple of good answers here from the chat. Tucker's Kobolds, Ivani. Tucker's Kobolds are great. Look them up online if you want the full story, but the basics are they were a group of kobolds, which are ordinarily very easy to kill, minor mook-like monsters, but Tucker had turned them into incredibly smart, vicious little bastards who would use each and every possible advantage they could get. And Morning Crescent says, Pun Pun. For anybody who doesn't know who Pun Pun is, Pun Pun was a kobold character created on the RPG.net forums, I think. Back in the day, he was an example of an incredibly broken build.
Pun Pun is also the protagonist of a really depressing manga.
Really? No
Unrelated
shit.
Pun Pun.
Oh, weird Pun Pun. Okay, that's fun. I didn't know that. So we got Manchun. We got the 7 sisters, which are daughters of Maestra's mortal vessel, and they are each powerful and influential in different ways. Illustrial of Silvery Moon, she's the ruler of Silvery Moon. Laeral is one of the open lords of Waterdeep. I think she may have inherited that role from Purgron. There's several more. I can't remember all their names, but they have a weird mix of power, politics, and personality that people really, really like. But for me, I want to talk about Mert the Moneylender.
Ooh.
Are you familiar with Mert the Moneylender?
You mentioned Mert earlier. Yeah.
He is a very fat, seemingly buffoonish old adventurer who is retired and now is a very wealthy Waterdeep insider. He is an investor. He is kind of like a good guy crime boss in a lot of ways because he's very lethal and cunning, but he's deeply tied into the Harpers and city politics. He's like this really memorable old rogue type character who interacts with new adventurers and old. So he's a great one he's a great way to get people into Waterdeep in the first place is through Mert the Moneylender.
Mm-hmm.
He's very much like the Godfather, if the Godfather, or I guess you might think of him more as like an old retired 007 agent, maybe.
Which is great fun.
Still dangerous, still a little sinister, but largely working for the greater good. He's fun. There's the characters from Drizzt Do'Urden's novels. There's Drizzt himself, who is
we've really touched on Drizzt.
What'd you like to describe Drizzt?
Drizzt is the most popular role-playing game character of all time because there were so many dual-wielding male drow in the era following his ascension. I think he popularized the idea of like dual-wielding to begin with, or like he was sort of where that comes from in the Western canon. He is the only good drow notoriously, which is, you can feel about that how you will. He is iconic. He is pretty cool. He and his band are from a series of novels that were based, again, on a tabletop campaign that was played out live. So, again, this is where like a lot of the iconic elements of D&D lore come from, or like borrowed from people's campaigns.
He was not a character from a campaign.
Was he not?
No, Drizzt was dreamed up in whole cloth by the author Bob Salvatore.
I thought it was from his campaign, though. I thought it was a part of like a game that he ran.
There's elements of his campaign that are in the stories, but Drizzt, specifically Drizzt. Yeah, just specifically Drizzt was created for he wanted to write a novel, and the guy asked him, "Well, who's it about?" on the phone, and he's told the story many times. He just came up with it like on the spot. He's like, "It's Drizzt Do'Urden of House Bainray of Menzo Baranzan." Like he came up with that one line on the phone with the agent for his book.
It makes sense that Drizzt himself was not a character then.
But Drizzt was as big a character to D&D as Wolverine is to Marvel. Probably.
Well, he's still getting games. He's still getting things made about him to this day.
Right, and he was so cool that he inspired everyone to make a character like him. If you ever run into a Drow Ranger with 2 enchanted scimitars and a magical panther figurine, then you are running into a guy who is deeply inspired by Drizzt Do'Urden. He will also redefine Drow from always evil into possible conflicted heroes, which there are characters from his stories. Artemis Enrari, which is a human assassin that is like the personal rival of Drizzt in a lot of ways. And then there's Jarlaxle, who is a very puckish dwarf Drow figure who is willing to work with people from the above the Underdark, from the overworld, if you will. Mm-hmm. These were things that were defined in the Drizzt Do'Urden novels, and they're pretty good. Like, I still enjoy them. I think they're well written. But at the time, they were like the best D&D fiction ever made. So this is all like pre-Game of Thrones. There was a lot of bad fantasy in the 80s and 90s, and Drizzt was one of the few where you could be like, no, this is actually good. You should read this.
Yeah, and like I get all these archetypes come from these novels, right? Like I maintain dual wielding is born there. Like that's where it got popularized to me, which certainly is now everywhere, right?
Yeah, definitely got popularized. I agree with that for sure. Dual wielding is something that was kind of more of an insider thing. Like if you talked about dual wielding, you were definitely like a guy who was deep into D&D until Drizzt came along, and then everyone was like, "Oh, dual wielding is the way. This is the way. It's the new Mandalorian."
It's just really cool to have 2 swords. It turns out.
I mean, the way that he wrote Drizzt, it was very cool. It was super cool.
I think it is fair to say also that he's why Drow have been kind of redeemed in part, right?
Well, certainly. He was so popular that everyone was like, okay, we need to have good Drow. Because, there were so many people playing that type of character after his introduction. Holy crap. I personally gamed with a guy in the army when I was doing a lot of D&D for 2nd edition. Advanced, most of my play of advanced D&D and 2nd edition D&D were done while I was in the army. And one of the guys I ran into was basically, what if Boba Fett but a Drow? And he's cool. And I was like, oh, you've read the Drizzt novels? He's like, hell yeah, I did. I mean, it was just that thing, everybody was doing it. Just about everybody was doing it. I think I was smart enough to be like, I've got other characters I can do.
Well, there's nothing wrong with like borrowing concepts from fiction you like, right?
Yeah, Ivani DK says he was the reason the Drow was entirely a race of good dual-wielding male rebels that were opposed to their evil Underdark dwelling kid. I mean, yeah, he was the face of Drow for so long. You're not wrong. I think there's a Community episode where they all play D&D, and somebody's basically, I think, what's that name of that actor?
Ken Jeong, I think.
Ken Jeong, yeah. He shows up as a Drow with white, and I'm like, clearly a Drizzt, that's a Drizzt reference. Zengen Man, thank you for the super chat.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yes, the good Drow era, soon to be superseded by the look at me tiefling era.
That is probably the fault. That's probably the fault of Critical Role.
Yes,
Jester is such an iconic tiefling. I can't tell you how many YouTube thumbnails I've seen of someone talking about how Jester as a icon is either great or ruin their campaign. So
well, both can be true. Like the thing is, Jester is such a well-played character who is very cute and maintains, despite like very silly and wacky, does not like derail the tone and works really well with the more serious members of the party. That is hard to do well. I think it is a challenge to play a character that is literally made of sparkles and that engages meaningfully with deeper tones, with darker narratives.
Yeah, Mornington Crescent points out you can look up. Whoops, wrong one. You can look up Ginny D's cosplay / songs about Jester. They are excellent. Yep. Ginny D, I have a picture of her right up here. Ginny D is a YouTuber who's famous for her cosplay and her songs and her D&D content. She's also a Denver native. So in
Oh,
my
very cool.
city, yep, that's why I have a picture of it there.
Yeah, like sort of the challenge when you take inspiration from a character you really like is executing on them and their themes in a way that is pro-social, let's say, and like good for the party. The archetypal not Drizzt character is a brooding loner, right? And that is hard to pull off if you're an inexperienced player.
Oh, extremely difficult. There's things that I've always said this, and I still think it's true. There's things that work great in fiction that do not work at the table.
And they can work at the table if the vibe of the table and the buy-in from all of the players and the GM is as such to make things run like a tighter narrative. But that takes like understanding or really good chemistry.
Super well. One of the reasons Jester works in Critical Role is because of the chemistry that Laura Bailey has with the rest of the cast, and the chemistry that, and the fact that Jester knew when to fucking stop.
Yes,
most of the time, which is not a. There are many players I know who do not have that skill.
Well, it's a hard skill to learn, which is like when to not take up space and when to take up just enough to deliberately provoke people and then to back down and handle it maturely in character, right? Like there's all sorts of room for this. And these are, I would say, advanced skills. We're getting into like 301 stuff for like how to be a good player.
Well, I think now would be a good time to talk about some of the weirder fun facts about the Forgotten Realms, if you're into it.
Sure. You got any weird fun facts for us?
So the moon there's a moon over Toril. It's called Selûne, which is the name of the goddess of the moon. And there's a ring of shards around it, which are called the Tears of Selûne. And this was caused by dragons who were trying to blast a cursed comet that periodically drove them mad with a laser beam of magic in a weird way. And so these fragments that they missed the comet and hit the moon, by the way. And so the shards of the moon are from a dragon laser that formed this. The shards of the moon that crashed onto Toril created the Sea of Fallen Stars. That's the origin of the Sea of Fallen Stars.
The only fun fact I can think of is a little so
also that moon is inhabited. There are people living on that moon. They have a different name for it and everything. And they have a Spelljammer hub on the moon.
Very cool.
Aboleths. So Aboleths are a great monster. They're one of my favorite monsters for D&D. Very rarely get to use them. But in the Forgotten Realms, what's really interesting about Aboleths is they predate everything. They are the oldest species. They have memories going all the way back to before the gods existed.
Which is really intriguing. I mean, we've had like a bunch of theological discussions recently about like elves on the fantasy side of the podcast, about like the history, the elven gods, and like what came before and the old ones. And the Aboleths, no, they were there.
That's right. Avani DK, thank you for the super chat. A long discussion can be had about the number of role-playing streams and if they have been beneficial or negative.
Well, Ross, you wrote a really cool article about this.
I did. I wrote a whole article. You can go to Bella Lost Souls. I wrote an article about streaming. My position has not changed. I think streaming is good. I think streaming has been a good thing. I think streaming has opened up role-playing to vast amounts of people who were intimidated by trying to read a 400-page core book. And being able to just show them an episode and say, this is what it's like, I think has made it so much more accessible than it's ever been before.
Yeah, I would like to think that presupposition about like what ways there are to play, like it does not survive a campaign that's run well. Like I think that it's true that people will come in with certain expectations given their context, right? Because of course they will. They are informed as like what this is by having seen it in the wild in like one place or another. But the real nature of the thing comes out when you do it with your friends, and you will find your own path into this. And I think that like anybody who plays for a while will find this to be true. What I do think the role-playing streams have done is curse many GMs with only ever playing D&D ever again.
maybe. I also feel like it raised the bar on DMing.
Yes, the expectations are higher.
I sympathize with people who have suffered from that. I do, but in the larger sense, I think it's a good idea because as a man of a certain age, I've played with a lot of DMs, and many of them were very casual and very phoning it in. And I think Critical Role and all the streams like it have encouraged most GMs to step up a bit more and do more and be better. And I think that's not a terrible thing. I realize I probably am sounding like an out of touch old man right now, but that's what I think. That's how I feel.
Well, the reality is that you have more fun when everybody's invested. Like this is I think non-controversial. Like if everybody like buys into the game, it is a more fun game. You can have a great time like drinking beer and throwing dice and like slaying goblins in a dungeon. You can do this. This is like a cool way to hang out with your friends. If you want to like have fun playing the game, being invested is a really good way to do that.
Agreed. Another fun fact: there is a cheese in the Forgotten Realms that's basically a drug.
Wow, just like real life.
It's called Lurin Spring Cheese. Sometimes in the fan base, it's just called Ease with extra E's. And it is from the halfling land of Lurien, and it is described as effectively a narcotic for halflings. Imagine like a cheese that's basically heroin, which I thought was funny as hell. There's also a really fun thing in Dwarven society called the Thunder Blessing. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with the Thunder Blessing.
So dwarves were the smallest demi-human species for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And in 3rd edition, they introduced this idea that there was a spike in twin births amongst the dwarves. And this was according to the lore of the setting, this was Moradin actually trying to rebuild his people. And so what he would do is he would actually split a soul destined for reincarnation, so they were born as twins rather than a single dwarf. So the Thunder Blessing is taking a single soul, splitting it into two, putting it into twins, and thus improving the demographics of the dwarven species. I thought that was pretty cool. I actually really liked that. I thought that was a fun way to play. If I was going to play with a friend and we both wanted to play dwarves, I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to be Thunder Blessing twins?" Because that would be really cool.
That is cool.
So we have spoken about this before. Ed Greenwood and other TSR people canonically exist in the realms because there is a communication. There's part of this conceit that the realms is parallel world occasionally visited or accessed by people from modern Earth. So it's not just Ed Greenwood, it's also a lot of the guys at TSR like Jeff Grubb and Kim Mohan, things like that. So yeah. I think there's just a lot of really weird, fun things. One of the greatest things about the Forgotten Realms is just the level of detail it gets into sometimes. Like, when Ed Greenwood talks about the coinage of the realms, he'll go into great detail about how what individual coins are called, even sometimes what they're made out of. Like, there's a very rare coin called the King's Tear, which is just fucking amazing. When you find one of these in a Dragon's Hoard, it's not like, oh, it's how many gold coins. Cool, but there's also the King's Tear. These are transparent, colorless, teardrop-shaped gemstones that were incredibly hard. They could not be destroyed by any mundane means. And a typical King's Tear was worth 5,000 gold pieces. Crazy. I was just like, oh, that's cool. I love that they have those things.
I prefer that to Electrum. That's just cool.
Oh yeah. There's the coinage. The coinage alone is worth your time.
I got a weird fun fact.
Okay.
There are canonical breast milk flavors in the Forgotten Realms.
Oh God, that's right. And that's from an interview with Greenwood, right?
Yeah, I think he made that up on the spot. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh my God, yeah. What was that? There is that story. Could you find the details on that? Because I really would like to talk about that.
if I recall, like I remember that like drow was like mushroom flavored, and like I think tiefling is cinnamon because they're from hell, so it's spicy.
Yeah,
This is a
weird.
real thing he said. I'm not making this up.
No, it's fair. That's fair. That's legit. If you want to look that up, I'll keep going here on
Yeah, we found it.
Necroplayer. Thank you for the super chat, Necroplayer. A hot take about D&D monster races. I think it sucks and feels vaguely racist that they only get to be player characters if their culture is erased or made more agreeable for civilized culture. I mean, it's a this is an ongoing struggle. Even fifth edition D&D struggles with it. Even today, we're struggling with this in role playing games. This is a fun one. Zengen Man says Ed Greenwood, the creepy uncle of D&D. I mean, I've met him. He's actually he's a very nice old man with a really active imagination.
But this is awesome.
He's a bit of a dirty old man. I'm not going to lie. He's got interests.
I have found a Discord comment by Ed Greenwood from 2 years ago.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, he was asked by someone named Goose Bolton. Hello, Ed Greenwood. Big fan. I have specific lore to ask you. It's very important. What do different races breast milk taste like? To which Ed responded, drow breast milk, thanks to the producer of extended exposure to cave fungi and mold, tastes more mushroomy than minty elven breast milk. To any humans who sample it, the result is more chalky and ever so slightly tart.
Yeah, he typical Ed fashion. It's a simple question. He gives you a whole fucking paragraph about the fat contents and like how nutritious it is.
You notice that to dwarves, both elven and drow breast milk tastes like licorice.
Oh my god!
He thought really hard about this. This is the lore.
It's wild. That is some lore. That is some deep lore from the.
If we're on the dirty old man kick, I think he also didn't he put brothels in literally every village in the entirety of Farron.
I mean, they're common.
Well, no, because they like told me you can't do that, so we made it fest halls instead.
Right. And this is where we get certain goddesses like Sune and Sharess. For them, the two goddesses that mostly deal in fucking.
Amazing.
Sebastian Muller, thanks for becoming a member. What in the D&D? Sorry, what?
Thanks, Sebastian. This is the lore. This is the forgotten part of the Forgotten Realms.
This is totally legit. There's a fucking wiki page for this.
Oh, is there a wiki page for like sex lore?
For the breast milk thing, yes, absolutely. It's hilarious. It's so wild. And just out of left field too. You're like, what the fuck? What?
Yo, more settings should do this. That's my first take.
But I would say that this is an example of how deeply Ed Greenwood thinks about his setting. He knows these facts. He knows like every like I was talking about coinage, right? Like every country has different coinage. They have different names for copper, silver, gold. They have
yes.
It's just wild, and it's a level of detail that is obviously inspired by Tolkien, who is also super detailed about his world. But it's a good reason why Forgotten Realms is a bit intimidating to a new player. They're like, oh shit, what do I have to know about this fucking place? Yeah, I'm going to recommend everyone who's interested in Forgotten Realms. If you want to see something really fun, check out this version of it sometime. The way it's written is so much less intimidating and so much more like go out and explore, go find your place on the frontier, go find your home in the Forgotten Realms. It was called the Forgotten Realms not because it was super detailed, but because there were all these lost empires and fallen elven cultures like Myth Draenor that were cool and interesting and fun. And it was called the Forgotten Realms because you could walk out of your village and stumble across, a ruined tomb that may hold an elven lich, which exists in the Forgotten Realms. They have a special name for them and everything. I forget what they're called, but they're really cool.
I do appreciate only different species, like long-lived natures, have different varieties of undeath. I think it's intriguing.
Baelnorn. They were called Baelnorn. And mostly Baelnorn are like They're undead liches, but they're really not like, they're typically non-evil. They're mostly like librarians and, you know, guys who like to study shit. I know, weird. Hey, we got another one from Zengen Man. What's sad is that's now canon. Greenwood has an absurdly favorable contract whereby the rights revert to him if the rights owners contradict him. You know what? He only got $5,000, man. He's got to get something out of the deal. So there you go. he's got full control over what's canon. You got to give it to him. I got to give him something.
That is kind of powerful. If that's like a clause in the contract, that's you know what? He gets to canonize dirty old man lore. Awesome. Hell yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't know if what Zengen Man is saying is true, but I mean it's possible. It's certainly possible. And thank you for the super chat, Zengen Man, and I appreciate you pointing that out because that's a really fun fact if it's true. Necroplayer, for those interested in atheism, I'd recommend the Setting of Eberron and the Blood of Vol religion. Is super fascinating and my favorite fantasy religion. I'm not familiar, so I'd have to go check that out. Eberron is a setting I don't know much about.
My understanding is they worship like the internal divinity and like the spark of divine within you, the person, and it's like very inward focused, kind of meditative. I'm not like super familiar though.
That's really cool though. I dig it. Thank you for pointing it out, Necroplayer. That's really, really cool. And we got one from Aeromob. You want to read this one?
Thank you, Arrow. The party walks into a cafe. The tiefling orders a macchiato. What kind of milk? What kind you got? The halfling bartender takes the longest sigh.
Oh, God. Yeah, I can just see that in my mind, too. That's great. What kind of milk? Well,
God.
That's great, man. Good one there, Bob. That's fucking awesome. You broke Vera.
Wow, the Forgotten Realms is awesome.
Well, we are running out of time on this episode, so we should probably get to our final thoughts on the Forgotten Realms. But is it local? Is it locally sourced? Is it organic?
Oh my
God. Vera, what are your final thoughts on the Forgotten Realms?
My final thoughts are: we, as people that love RPGs, owe the Forgotten Realms a debt of gratitude because it cemented a lot of the really cool structures that have come to define some of the best things in role-playing games. It set a standard that I think a lot of games still try to live up to. It is important and influential. It is alive still today. This awesome Discord comment I was reading from 2 years ago, so it's very alive. Expect to see more things set in the Forgotten Realms over the next few decades. There's a lot there to love.
I'd love to see a TV series set into it. I really would.
Oh yeah.
I wish Hasbro would just get its hat out of its ass and do something, more with D&D because it's just they're not. But yeah, so a TV series set in Forgotten Realms would be awesome.
Any thoughts yourself, Ross?
Yes. So Forgotten Realms is basically D&D's biggest sandbox. It is a sprawling, high magic world built out of layered histories and meddling gods and fallen empires and like 1,000 overlapping stories. You could pick up any one of these at your table and make it your own. It is somewhat generic, but it's generic in the best way where it's familiar, but with enough depth that it can be, that any tone can work and that you can have just about any kind of story there. Its greatest strength and its greatest flaw are the same fucking thing. There's just so much of it. There's so much lore of the realms that you can treat it like a rich buffet, steal from, or you can just ignore all of it and carve out a small corner. But it is a kitchen sink setting that has some great characters, some great locations. And the job that it does, I think, better than anything else, is it gives generations of players a common backdrop for their adventures. So when somebody says to you, hey, we fought cultists under Baldur's Gate, you could be like, oh, I know what that is. I have a mental image of that. Even if the details are uniquely yours, the vernacular of the Forgotten Realms gives you a bit of a shared experience with other gamers, like a bond.
Well, there's something beautiful about that, right? Like parents and children can share a setting. You know, it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing.
Necroplayer, finally, shout out to the new Ravenloft book. Okay, I'm unfamiliar. What's the shout out? Necroplayer. What am I missing? Is there did Elminster show up in Ravenloft? What's going on?
So there are werewolf PCs, which is cool. I literally, one of my many marked sections in my 3.5 books is the section for lycanthropy and like how it works for player characters. So I'm excited about that. I think that's fun.
Yeah, the realms used to be the place that is still the place that offers the most different types of characters to play. You can be any of, dozens of species, any of all the classes. And you can belong to the big four factions, or even a smaller faction like the Shadow Thieves, and get involved with all that level of politics. If I were to recommend to someone to start out, I would say pick a spot on the Sword Coast and make that your hub. It doesn't have to be a big city. It can be a big city. It can also be a small settlement or village or castle or keep. You could even start out in the Underdark and have a hell of a good time. I would love that.
Yeah, like I think that picking out a strong starting location that maps the kind of tone or theme you want is a great way to get into it.
We get werewolf player characters. Oh, okay, that's a
yeah.
I get it now. A new player's book is recently announced for Ravenloft. Okay, cool.
Can I show off one really cool thing too as we're ending?
Yes, please. Show it off.
Salty Job has made a cute little thing. She has drawn us, as a matter of fact, and I am quite touched by that. It's a Sister of Devlin. It's so cute.
Oh my god, that's amazing! Holy shit, that's me and you.
I am actually touched. That's adorable. Thank you so much.
Please offer my most sincere thanks and appreciation to the artist. That is absolutely wonderful. And could you send this to me on Discord? I'd love to have.
I will send you the file. It is so cute. I will pass along your appreciation if she's tottered off. But
oh my god,
that's so much, Salty. That's so cute.
Yeah, big thank you. God, that's so cool. I love it. We're both deep goblin or deep gnomes.
Yeah.
That is rad. Wow. I have my hat on with a little candle. It's got the ears. Oh, it's the best. My god, that is freaking awesome. This job is great. I gotta tell you guys, this job is so great. Oh my god. Wow.
It is always a pleasure, Ross. Seriously.
So cool. I almost don't want to take it down. Oh, that's so cool, man. God damn.
Yay.
All right. So you can catch us on Lorebeards Roleplaying every Monday. And if you have enjoyed our discussion of the Forgotten Realms, please do us a favor, hit that like button and the subscribe button so the algorithm can help spread our heresy to more unsuspecting minds. We will see you guys next Monday. We're going to be doing, Vera, we have talked about doing some polls, but I don't know if we're ready for that yet.
We have a couple of ideas. We have some topics selected. I think we might want to cover several of them in the near future. We could poll list which is covered first. We've got a few interviews coming up in the next few weeks, hopefully. Lots of cool stuff in store. Season 2 is off to an awesome start, and I'm super excited.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, why don't you get with me after, and I'll put up a poll for 3 topics that we both like, and
yeah,
do that for next week. So you guys will be being able to vote on what we're going to talk about pretty soon. This show has been great. Season 2 is off to a really good start. I am so excited to talk about Birthright and Ravenloft and Planescape. Oh my god, Planescape!
Heck yeah!
So rad. Oh man, we could talk about Galarian. We could talk about other settings that are really wild and interesting, like the Cyberpunk setting, for example. It's really cool.
Ooh, yeah, kind of topical.
But very, extremely.
Season 2 of the anime is coming out.
Oh yeah. I hope it emotionally destroys me as much as the first one.
I played episode 1 of that for my students, and one of them just started crying hysterically. I was like, oh, he'd seen the whole thing before, by the way. He was like, it hit him that hard.
As soon as that song comes on, you know the one. And you're
he'd literally seen the entire show, and that's why it hit him so hard.
Wow, that's wild. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us on Lorebeards Roleplaying. We will catch you next time.
Thanks, y'all.
we need to find a better outro for this. I think. But all right, cool. See you next time.
Bye, y'all. Farewell.